Welcome to the Cross Commission podcast. I'm Ryan. We got Jake.
Greetings.
We're now at the point where the season's over. Season's over. Arsenal's leading in the Champions League final as we record this. Carolina Hurricanes are in the Stanley Cup final. Bleak times, man.
I don't even like sports.
Less we say about our baseball teams, the better.
Dude, don't it just? Oh my god! Don't get me started. Please don't get me started. There's a PLL game going on right now.
Yeah.
At Ridley, Baltimore.
Yeah, I was thinking about going to the one in Hofstra, but then it's the same weekend that I'm going to the U.S. Open at Shinnecock. So
that feels like terrible scheduling.
Yeah, they made it Father's Day weekend, but they made it during Shinnecock weekend.
I don't know what the crossover is but that's still like
pretty high crossover when you're talking Long Island upper middle class
incomes with
and cross and golf.
It is the U.S. Open, so it's like one of those things that just like even if it's not,
I mean, I guess they're angling for the Father's Day weekend angle, but
yeah, I feel like you could have done. I mean, listen, I'm sure putting together a schedule is hard, so I don't, want to. I'm not gonna, knock them too much. I mean, though I don't. Some of their schedule still just doesn't. I don't understand how the season started earlier. The last 2 years it starts earlier than ever, and yet they still finish on the same date.
With the same amount of events too, right?
Yes, the same number of games. They start earlier. To me, the whole thing with starting earlier was that you'd get away from having to go up against the NFL. And you could, to me, I mean, if you're going to start earlier, I think the thing to do would just be, to me, the schedule that's always made most sense to them was Memorial Day to Labor Day, if they could have figured that out. And they could play the championship that Sunday, that college football, the Labor Day, like they can play the championship. There's nothing going on that. I mean, there's a college football game at night, but ESPN otherwise
Friday afternoon, like 1:00,
or just that Sunday. That Sunday at
that's what I'm saying. Labor Day Sunday.
Yeah, that Labor Day Sunday at 1:00, I think would be that'd be perfect.
So let me see real quick their schedule. So
I think they built in more bye weeks, which. I mean, sure. I don't know. They have what, a 10, 11, 12-week season? I don't know how many bye weeks you really.
So they have, let's see, they just had a bye week last week.
Yeah, they take Memorial. They take off.
Yeah, they get a bye week between Charlotte and the Stewart. So they take a bye week the weekend of the 13th. They have the All-Star Game 4th of July weekend. And they go pretty solidly through July. But then they have a bye week before the playoffs in August, and then they have a bye week between the semifinal and the championship.
I don't know, man. And I feel like, I mean, I guess all of it depends on what ESPN is
offering
to do, but it feels like it'd be, if you're going to start earlier and you're going to go up against the NCAA playoffs, I feel like the thing to do would be because I know that was a sort of controversial move for some, that it felt like they were kind of, sort of infringing on college's turf a little bit, especially with and they do
Saturday night games.
They do play up against the first round of the Saturday, and they play a Saturday night game. I think that first they play 2 games up against the first round of the playoffs. So it's not like a drastic move, but it is a little bit, and it's obviously like attention and things like that. I feel like if you're going to do it, the thing to do would be to get something out of it in return, which to me would be not go up against the NFL and finish your season a little earlier than that. I think the TV dates they have are largely still the same. I don't think I think the numbers been roughly the same the past couple
Yeah,
years.
the playoffs are actually taking off Labor Day weekend.
I wonder if that's not.
I wonder if that's again because ESPN's probably loading up Labor Day.
Yeah, I think they usually played that Labor Day Sunday though, the semifinals. I believe in the past.
Yeah, they're playing week 0.
Ooh, penalty. Let's go, baby. Yeah. Le Paris.
World's largest PSG supporters here. Hey, at least Tottenham didn't get relegated. So at least I won't give up watching the sport of soccer during the home World Cup, because between Ireland, the way that they lost in the qualifiers, and if Tottenham went down after Arsenal wins the league, forget it. You suggested it on a prior pod, just like take a year sabbatical.
So I think that would have been a good idea. Allons PSG. That's what Google Translate says. Let's go PSG in French. Allez. Yeah, allez.
Allez.
It says allons in the was it the monster, the Canadian ole. I can do
Ole.
Ole. Yeah, that's that guy right there. That's me. Now, if they miss this penalty, I'm going to get off this podcast.
Yeah. And then I got to kill an hour and a half just talking about, hey, remember what I said about Princeton in 2017 that made Jake rage quit at the end of an episode? I was right in the end.
You were. That's for sure.
We'll get to lacrosse talk right after this penalty.
What are we checking? Oh, God, everything. The VAR.
VAR ruins everything.
So how are we checking this? It's a penalty. I don't understand what's happening.
No, the Arsenal conspiracy's got to chime in and reverse it.
How is this still? This is brutal, dude. He literally goes through the back of him. It's an obvious penalty.
I mean, can they review for a red card? That's maybe what they're doing.
I don't think that's what they're. It said penalty check. Corey Haim is going full-time cup racing in 2027.
Yes.
He's driving 2311's third Toyota.
Yeah, I mean that, or have Riley Herbst just there.
Isn't he the one who Ty Gibbs won't let into JGR? Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, the time in between. This is insane.
This is what you get to look forward to with this World Cup. It's going to be VAR all the time during the World Cup.
No, the goalies, he's hugging the referee. This is insane. Replay is a scourge, dude. More and more I get, the more I've just decided all right, about time. Let's freaking go. Ole. Dembele. There we go. Now Arsenal actually has to, try and play soccer. Let's see how that goes.
I swear to God.
Insert the podcast now.
Yeah. One other note, like every freaking guest they're having on this like Beckham sidecast, everyone's magically an Arsenal fan.
The sidecast thing has probably jumped the shark.
Oh yeah, it jumps the shark ages ago. I think the Manning cast is like the only one that works. I mean, granted, ESPN, we're still listening if you want a cross commission alt cast during the Final Four one of these years.
Yeah.
Offer's still on the table.
Our videos get more than the Washington Post, all the Washington Post podcasts on those Washington Post podcasts they put on YouTube now. They get like 300 views. We're like, dang, man, the Power Hour gets more than that.
maybe cause you know how like in basketball these neutral site games are like Duke's doing all these like neutral site games that they could sell off to like Prime and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like if we could get Chris to convince the good folks at TNT Sports to like buy the rights to some random neutral site game, and then they put us on True TV as an alt cast.
We could be the commentary. We could even be the commentary.
Yeah, we could even be the content. Nobody will know what the hell they're watching, and all announcing will say it's the most bizarre telecast of all time. But
shout out, Safe trying to get NBC to buy the men's lacrosse tournament rights back in like 2021.
We had a sliver of opportunity, and then it was like, you know what? No, we're just going to pay more so that way the women's basketball tournament's kind of at market value, and everyone else is included for free. And that was that.
Did you see
that there were all lawsuits and everything about dividing it up because the women's basketball tournament was way above the value of the contract, and then ESPN was like, okay, we'll just pay more for the women's basketball tournament. We get everything else for free, and that was that.
Did you see that article about how FIFA tried to get out of the Fox thing for the World Cup? Because it was
they left like billions on the table with that.
There was because it's FIFA, and there was an obvious corruption angle in there somewhere. And it was something about, let's see if I can find it. FIFA Fox Sports World Cup deal. It was an awful announcing piece I saw.
I mean, I too would want to get off of Fox when every other broadcaster has demonstrated that they're way better at doing this soccer thing.
Okay, so the original report came from the New York Times. FIFA's
probably
decision,
The Athletic.
Yeah, FIFA's decision to extend Fox's World Cup contract, which initially accounted for just the 2018 and 2022 tournaments, was made in exchange for the broadcaster not acting against FIFA should the World Cup dates be moved. So when Fox won the rights to the 2018 and 2022 tournaments for a reported $425 million, a process that itself has since been met with a heavy dose of skepticism following an indictment by the Department of Justice, alleging widespread corruption of FIFA's sale of broadcasting rights. The network argued to FIFA the rights were worth $425 million only if the tournaments were played on their usual summer dates. So basically, Fox essentially
make good, yeah.
Yeah, they used the bargaining chip of, we're going to pay you this money because it was supposed to be in the summer. If you give us the 2026 thing, so FIFA gave them the 2026 thing for $425 million to air a World Cup in the United States, which is like, I mean, preposterously undervalued. It's not even like they could have got $1 billion probably for the World Cup.
And it wasn't like the Winter World Cup in Qatar hurt at all with ratings. In fact, they got a huge boost by being a lead-in for the NFL with the final.
That's true, yeah. Who is now walking along the sidelines? Is that the police? There's like police walking like along the touchline, I think.
As the security, I guess.
It looks like it. I'm like, what are these people suddenly like walking around the sidelines?
So boy, we went way in the weeds with this. This is vintage Cross Commission podcast. Some might even say crosscast. So if you were here wanting us to give lacrosse talk, our apologies. But I mean, come on, like World Cup should be on one of ESPN, ABC, or NBC, or CBS, or even TNT, or even ION.
Yeah, I mean, just do a good job.
Anybody but Fox.
Which Fox doesn't do a good job. They do terrible. So yeah, it basically was a bribe thing, and then FIFA tried to get out of it, and
in the most FIFA way possible, and no.
Yeah, it didn't happen.
All right, news and notes. Virginia. Let's start off with them because the messiest situation ever got messier and more hilarious with their introductory press conference.
Yeah, like just one of the more bizarre things I've ever seen. So first off, there was an article like the morning of the on like virginiasports.com or Virginia's athletic website, basically, which talked about Cassis was interviewed, and it talked about like it interviewed some of the players. It was like sort of a behind the scenes that's kind of like look into the process. And there was just this weird there were a lot of weird things about it, but there's this weird section in there where it says, I'll read off it directly. Cassis 45 said he spoke with Tiffany for about 45 minutes Friday night and updated him on, quote, my status with the search. Not really sure what that was like meant regarding his tech. Like, Virginia didn't have a head coach at that time. And I believe at that time they were still interviewing or trying to maybe negotiating with Dan Chamati. As he takes charge of a program that has won 7 NCAA titles, 2 of them under Tiffany, Cassie said his first priority is, quote, to make sure that I thank Lars. He's a friend first and foremost, and there's a lot of narratives out there that are trying to tear that apart, and that's something that is really important to me. He goes on, there's a lot to unpack just there. But he goes on to say, there's always 2 sides of a relationship, so he's got to be a willing partner of that as well. But at least on my side, I have 0 ill will. And I'm just grateful to him for bringing me here and for 22 years of friendship and mentorship. Just so much to unpack here.
What this is getting at is the first Virginia versus wherever Lars ends up game in the first round of the tournament is going to be the narrative game to end all narrative games.
If Lars takes one of these jobs that gets him in, or if he goes back in the ACC with maybe like an SMU thing, or if he takes another job, the narrative's going to be crazy. But there's just so much.
Congratulations, college lacrosse has made it. This is like SEC levels of messy. It
really is. Like, just the fact that a guy like Lars got let go in the way he did, the bizarre nature of the press release, and it's like, first, because he says there's a lot of narratives out there that are trying to tear that apart, and that's something that is really important to me. What are those narratives? Like, what are you referring to? And we'll get to this, but are you referring to like the sentiment on social media, which I'm not saying is true or not, but it's definitely the sentiment on social media that you pulled off a coup d'etat and like Julius Caesar the guy? Like, is that the narrative? Like, what narratives exactly are you referring to when you? It's one of those just like when you're doing like a deposition or something, and they're like, just answer yes or no, and then you start like just going like freewheeling and incriminating yourself. It's like nobody was talking, like nobody asked you about narratives. Why did you just bring that up your own volition? Then he goes on, there's always 2 sides of relationships, so he's got to be a willing partner of that as well, which is suddenly just like putting the camera on Lars to be like, listen, I love the guy. I mean, he doesn't want to be friends. Like, it's like, okay. And then finally, at least on my side, I have 0 ill will. What would you have ill will for?
You became the head coach of the University of Virginia men's lacrosse team.
Like Lars got let go and you took his place. However that played out, that's just the events of what, happened. What would you have ill will towards Lars for? Like, what? I don't understand.
Yeah, because officially it was just that they did not renew Lars's contract, correct? That was
officially,
the official word from UVA.
No, the official word from UVA was nothing. It was that the official word from UVA was that Lars Tiffany is no longer the head coach. I'll find it.
Okay, yeah, so.
Here we go. Lars Tiffany will not return as head coach of the men's lacrosse program.
So where's the ill will? So if you're going by official PR speak, which is what you're supposed to do here.
Yes.
There shouldn't be any ill will whatsoever. It's just that, Lars is gone.
Well, yeah, what would be the ill will? Like, I don't know what possibly.
Like, we can assume, and I think we could kind of see it with what's behind the scenes, but you got to stick with what's official.
Well, it's also like, I don't understand in any scenario what ill will he would have towards Lars. Like, you're the benefited party in this situation, which, listen, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, the guy wanted a head coaching job. He admitted when he got hired at UVA, the reason he went there was to. So he literally said it publicly. He's like, the reason I came here is to work with Lars and to set myself up for the next ACC head coaching job, be that Duke, UNC, UVA, whatever. Just out in the open. Like, yeah, I came here so I could get an ACC job. It's like, okay. I mean, that's like, it's usually not how people play that sort of thing, but fair enough, I guess. And obviously, yeah, he did get, he got the job. But that was bizarre.
During the press conference where he made
boy.
somebody making reference to how he held the coaching job at Duke, which was on an interim basis for the offseason before they hired Danowski after the canceled season, and Plesser was like, oh, that was gold.
He also said that, like, as if it had happened, like, recently. Like, it was 20 years ago.
Years ago.
That's been a long time, man.
The 30 for 30s, like, on the scandal was like 15 years old.
Yeah, over a decade. So that was odd. Then the presser happens. We should mention Carla Williams is asked about, like, sort of like, so what happened? Like, how did, like, was Lars let go? Was he fired? Like, what's the thing? She, like, pauses and says nothing for, like, a good 5 seconds. And then she goes, what I will say is, like, another pause, I want to thank Coach Tiffany. And then just equivocates and obfuscates for, like, 30 seconds. It's incredible. And says absolutely nothing at all.
In other words, her lawyers told her don't say anything, which means...
Which is good because
that's
absolutely not how
the opposite.
That's not how they played the rest of this press conference.
Yeah.
So Cassis reads off a prepared statement about the Lars situation, which he kind of reads it like he's under duress. Like he's reading off this prepared statement. He's like looking down at the statement as he's reading. Like, it's like one of those press conferences. Like, remember the press conference where what is it? Like when Tiger Woods had to admit that he cheated on his wife?
Yeah.
he was and he had like the background, and he's just like, it's like one of those where like, you need to say this and only this. And it's like, I don't, it just comes off as, the statement is about how much Lars means to him, which I'm not disputing. Lars hired him at Stony Brook way back in the day. He obviously hired him again here at Virginia. They seem, Lars kind of spoke about the good relationship they had, and because he's talking about, if that's what you were going to do, it feels really weird to do that off a prepared statement where you're just like you're literally reading down, telling us all about how much this guy means to you. Just a little odd. Then he says, what does he say? In contrast to a lot of opinions that simply don't matter. Once again, what are these opinions? What are you saying? There was the really funny part where there were some questions alluding to Virginia's what we've talked about, the financial situation of Virginia, what they're doing with regards to funding scholarships and things like that. And there was some illuminating things in here where at one point it's like mentioned as like a positive for Cassis getting the job, that he's a great fundraiser because he had to do it at Lehigh, which again, like Kevin Cassis did a really good job at Lehigh. So just sort of a weird thing during like, I mean, it can happen, but it's you usually don't hear that sort of thing in a coaching hire, like that the guy's a great fundraiser. And then Carla Williams also had like a question where she's like, fundraising is everyone's responsibility. And then she admitted that money has had to be moved from other sports towards football, which isn't uncommon strictly to, it's not, Virginia's not the only program where that's the case. But it's in contrast to some other schools out there right now in the lacrosse space, it puts them in a tricky situation, I would say, because with programs like Notre Dame and Duke, they obviously are able to self-fundraise through like alumni and things like that, and parents at a really, really high clip. And so that's why those are the two that are kind of considered to be sort of at the front of the pecking order when it comes to funding scholarships and things like this. Then you have the Big Ten schools where their benefit is that the Big Ten TV contracts are just paying out insane money. They paid out like $70 million this year, and it's only going to go up. I think it's going over $100 million next year. So having to move around money is not as much of a concern at those Big Ten schools. It is at a lot of ACC programs right now. But amongst the ACC schools that have lacrosse, Virginia sort of openly admitting that was a little eye-opening, I thought, as to just the kind of situation that they're in with that. And it lends credibility to what's been the murmurs behind the scenes, which is that Virginia is having to play a significant degree of catch-up in that kind of space.
I'm trying to get this up too, because I'm glad you point that out, because there's an interesting thing in Sportico.
Yes, let's hang on.
Yeah, I'll hang on to that.
Well, I guess we can do this now. So bring up the Sportico thing, because I think this is worth talking
Yeah,
about.
I'm not able to share the screen, but I'll get a screenshot for you up in a sec. This chart, because vis-a-vis Virginia to where they are with the other schools in the ACC. So this is a list of the top 10 NCAA men's lacrosse budgets in 2025. You'll notice if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're listening to it, I'll describe it. So Syracuse, Duke, and Notre Dame have the 3 largest budgets for NCAA men's lacrosse, then followed by Ohio State and Michigan and Maryland and Rutgers. So you got ACC in the top 3, then Big Ten in 4 through 7. Then you got Hopkins as well. Then Richmond. Then Virginia's all the way down in 10.
So this is a good, because I think a lot of people saw this and were kind of wondering, and we've seen some of this data before. So here's what this is basically taking into account. This is essentially all of the, this is the money that they have to report to the Department of Education for how much is spent on the program. This is basically front-facing sort of, funding, things like that. So it's travel expenses, it's the cost of hosting games, it's logistical stuff, all that sort of thing. So why does Cuse have the highest lacrosse budget, for instance? Well, a lot of Cuse people tell you part of that is that the cost of playing games at the Dome is more expensive than for most other schools to where they play their games. And Cuse plays more home games generally than anybody else. So a big part of why Syracuse is spending more, Syracuse's lacrosse budget is more expensive than anybody else, is flat out just the amount of the money that it costs to play games at the Dome. Charter flights go into this, all that, all that sort of thing is largely basically what this is. It's the athletic department says, we're going to give you X amount of money to host games, put games on, travel here or there, maybe some for recruiting visits, things like that as well. And that's about it. This does not include NIL they don't have to report that information in here. So the NIL money or the rev share money that is revenue share. So the NIL or money taken from revenue share that they are using to fund scholarships, whatever the cost of a scholarship is, and give to players is not being included here. Now, I will say that the top 9 or however many names that are on this list are probably very high on that list as well. Duke and Notre Dame are very high, are considered to be very high amongst, again, in the scholarship kind of race. They're probably up towards 30 scholarships. Ohio State is considered to be, if not there already, definitely kind of progressively escalating up to that ladder. I'm not sure about where Michigan is at. Maryland is, I think, up now around 23, 24, 25. Johns Hopkins is quickly moving up that ladder if they're not there already. We've talked a little bit about the kind of advantage that Hopkins has. Several advantages they can use here. One is financial aid to a degree, kind of like the Ivy League schools. Another is that, pardon me, Hopkins did opt into revenue sharing as for playing in Division I lacrosse. Hopkins has 2 Division I sports. So however much money Hopkins is choosing to, divvy out, they're not using all of that $20 million. But however much of that money that Hopkins is choosing to give out is going to men's lacrosse and it's going to women's lacrosse. That's it. They don't have to give any to football. They don't have to give any to basketball, anything like that. So that's obviously a big help there for Johns Hopkins. Richmond wouldn't be in the rev share thing, but they can still do some through NIL. Richmond is obviously does have some, they have a very, very, very high endowment, things like that. Richmond has definitely put a lot of money into the program. I'm not sure to what degree it's in scholarship specifically, but they have given a lot of support to the program. The one team not on here that is believed to be really high up there is North Carolina. But like, so the part of this, why this is interesting, is that this was published in an article in Sportico that was talking about Princeton, and it was talking about the success that Ivy League schools could still have, even with in like the NIL thing, NIL era, or yada, transfer portal era, and yada yada. And I think we'll talk more about this when we talk about Princeton, but the transfer portal thing is definitely true. That with the way, like, Princeton is obviously probably number one of teams that got pillaged through the transfer portal. You look at the talent that left Princeton in 23 and 24 and so on and so forth. But that's obviously something true in the fact that Ivy League teams can't really take transfers in. The Ivy League is not falling, but the teams that are falling behind with like NIL and lacrosse and things like that are your Patriot League schools. It's your mid-majors writ large, who are just unable to really bring in. If you go back and look at
if you read the article on Sportico, you notice like Hofstra, Loyola were in the top 10 in 2010. They're nowhere close to that in 2025.
Yeah, and again, it's like I think a lot of that is more about there's a lot of Hofstra's sort of, we talked a bunch about this. Hofstra's sort of institutional support towards lacrosse is just not anywhere near what it once was. I don't really know exactly why, but that's just the nature of the case. But like a Loyola is not going to be able to compete for Loyola just doesn't compete for top end recruits the way they used to. If you go back, Loyola used to get a handful of really Notre Dames. Pat Spencer was a 5-star recruit. The key there was Pat Spencer was a late bloomer, kind of popped on late. Loyola was able to do really well as part of other mid majors were Albany, Towson, etc. because of early recruiting. Which meant that they were able to pick up on some guys who really popped in their junior or senior years. And when everyone was sort of playing with the same 12.6, maybe a couple more, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 scholarships, those programs are able to be in the mix. That we're talking about different ball games now. And so the teams that are being hurt by this are the Patriot League schools, mid-majors writ large. I think Georgetown and Denver are sort of the intriguing teams here in the sense that they have D1, they have the ability to opt in. Georgetown opts into rev share for basketball, things like that. Denver has the ability to with hockey and some other sports. Mm-hmm. Have they opted in? On Denver, I'm not 100% sure if they have or not.
Yeah, it's a little bit trickier too because they're private institutions, and I feel like though that's the thing with Denver is you mentioned a good point is their NIL bucket's going to be very heavily on men's hockey.
Probably if they are engaged in that, yeah. So, and like this was a question that we got from a listener was asking, interested in your take on challenges facing Power 4 lax programs need to fund rev share for football and basketball compared to Ivies, Hop, etc. that do not. Also, private Power 4s like Notre Dame, Duke, Cuse may have more flexible ways to fund non-rev sports compared to public Power 4s like UVA, UNC, Maryland. I mean, it's all a case by case, like we're talking about.
Yeah, so circling back to UVA here.
Notre Dame and Duke have very, very wealthy parents, and they get a lot of money, and they have a lot of wealthy alum, things like that. I think the Big Ten schools, with the TV deals that they're getting, are in a position to where it's not. Obviously, money has to be funneled towards football and basketball, but with the money that the Big Ten is, the money the Big Ten schools are getting, it's just not as much of a concern in writ large with these sports, not just lacrosse specifically, compared to, let's say, ACC schools, who financially, a lot of them are just not on solid footing because the gulf in television money between the Big Ten and the SEC and the ACC it's becoming like gargantuan. Now, again, Notre Dame and Duke and UNC, it appears, are not having the same issue because of, the ability to kind of sort of flexible ways to fund sports. I think Syracuse, I know that Syracuse fans have talked about this being an issue and how they were behind in this race. It appears that they've done some things to maybe try and bridge the gap. We'll see in the kind of upcoming recruiting class, maybe next year's as well, to what degree they're able to bridge that gap. But I know if you look at Syracuse's recruiting classes the past couple years, they're not at the level of North Carolina and Duke and Notre Dame, and Princeton is also the other team that's in that bucket. So Virginia though appears to be 5th out of 5 in the ACC in this regard, and so.
Yeah, and I think with Virginia, it doesn't help that they also got to fill a bunch of other buckets. You got your men's basketball bucket, you got your baseball bucket. There's a bunch of women's sports they're good at too. So they got a lot of. I think it's what makes it harder for UVA and to UNC to an extent too is that because they have that culture of a full-fledged non-revenue. A healthy, robust non-revenue program. Well, now you got to put it in a whole bunch of buckets. Whereas like at Syracuse, in terms of non-revenues, it's really field hockey, men's lacrosse, and men's soccer. And and women's lacrosse, and that's really about it. Or a Duke, it's really just women's soccer and men's lacrosse, and I think their softball team's good too. But for a UNC or UVA, you've got to spread it across a whole athletic department because of your success in across the board non-revenues. Now you got to put them in all. You got to spread it out through all these buckets, and of course, with a crunch on public education, that doesn't help matters either.
What I'll say to that is that it appears that every revenue is. It appears the UVA has sort of taken the approach of like picking your children. They appear to have not looked to prioritize any, and it seems like UVA is basically funneling it all towards football and basketball, particularly football. Why this is the case is an interesting question. There are probably UVA specific people who can answer this question better than we could. I think it's a couple things. One, Carla Williams worked at the University of Georgia for a long time in a lot of different capacities. I think that might be part of it, being from the SEC in that background. And the kind of importance that football has. I wonder if there's not also a degree of looking at looking at maybe the next round of realignment. And is UVA trying to put everything towards football to prepare themselves for the next round of realignment? Because if there is a next round of realignment, because if there's another round of realignment, it's probably going to, yes, there are certain things of media markets and things like that will come into play, but being good, especially when this inevitable football splitting off from the rest occurs, which feels like it has to happen at some point. When that occurs, the biggest thing you could have if you're trying to get into one of these 2 super leagues or whatever, or 3 maybe, is being good at football and actually being a value add in football. And I think UVA is putting a lot right now into being good at football.
Yeah, and that added on with the fact, they were in the ACC championship game.
Some of it's worked. Their football program
it's working. Yeah, but now they also got the impetus that now Virginia Tech hiring Franklin. Now they're in an arms race with the other public P4 institution in their state. So.
Yeah, I think that,
and remember they're going to be attached to the hip with Virginia Tech. That's why Virginia Tech's in the ACC in the first place, because Virginia's state legislature boxed out Syracuse to make sure Virginia Tech joined UVA in the first ACC Big East realignment.
For sure, yeah. And so I think, look, the ACC payouts they're going to be less than half of the Big Ten, in terms of the TV payouts, things like that. It's a massive gulf, and a lot of a lot of schools in public education or higher education are facing this right now. But in particular, there's a lot of it's hitting. A lot of Louisville's got a significant budget deficit they're facing. I know Cuse cut a lot of academic programs, things like that. So this is hitting a lot of these schools in particular, and I don't think it's going to hit Notre Dame, I think, is Notre Dame, and Notre Dame's always going to have a certain degree of security. Duke is Duke, always have a certain private school, and like kind of the wealthy, alumni parents that they have. I think they'll be fine. But a lot of, Miami's another one. Like they don't have a lacrosse program, but Miami's certainly Miami's been probably one of the biggest schools that's been helped by this NIL rep share type era. And what they can give. But I think for a lot of these other, AC schools, it's a bit, it's been interesting. On the flip side, amongst the Big Ten type programs, Ohio State, Penn State, like the money they just have is just, those schools already are working with tons of money. And then you just throw on the extra money there to Michigan. Now, Michigan is one that might be more like, might be the case of what you're mentioning with, Virginia, where it's like at lacrosse as a new program at Michigan, comparing it with, a lot of what else Michigan has with like hockey, and, we'll see about Michigan baseball had a really good run towards late 2010s, but then they lost their coach to Clemson. So I don't, but Michigan's got you mentioned, kind of broad. Michigan's another one of those schools, broad, athletic, kind of, that's kind of what I figured with Penn State as well. Because Penn State had a lot of programs.
Wrestling. They're putting hockey, wrestling, hockey. They're putting a lot into it, McKenna and all.
So, but Penn State has just, again, it's when you have when the money these schools are getting is just the degree it is. You're well capitalized in a way that even if you are spreading the wealth, there's still enough to go around. And I think that's the position that schools like Ohio State and Penn State are in. And then, to that point, we're going a lot of different directions here, but to tie it to your point, to the Sportic article, the Ivy League schools I tweeted this out. It's like, I think the transfer portal element is true. And in general, look, we'll talk about the Ivy League schools. They should get to puff their chest out as much as they want. They took a bunch of heat after 2022, particularly from ACC schools, particularly from Notre Dame. And so I think the Ivy League should get to pump out their chest literally as much as they want after the past 2 years. But the Ivy League is not behind in this race. Now, certain schools might be, but I can promise you Princeton is not. I promise you that Yale probably won't be. Like all of the Ivy League has the capability, and I think the big programs, especially Princeton, just look at their recruiting classes, are able, with what they're able to do with financial aid and things like that. The Ivy League is not the team that's being hurt in this race. The Ivy League, there's a reason that we've talked about this Power 3 that's coalescing. The Ivy League is in that mix, and the Ivy League is not going to. I think the Ivy League is only going to continue to get better. I think you have what you have with Princeton and Cornell. I think Yale looks like they've got a good group that can be in the mix for the next couple of years. Harvard's in a tricky spot, but they're, at least as far as consistency goes, this is probably the most consistent stretch Harvard has had in a while. I think Penn with Taylor Ray, I think is going to be in the mix here in a couple of years. You've got Brown with, we'll see with Torpy. Brown had an improved team this year. I think the Ivy League is going to be in a spot where pretty consistent. They have 4 or 5 teams in the top 20. So it's like,
and Dartmouth has gotten much better in the past couple of years too.
We'll see. Yeah, Kerwin. I don't know if he was ever going to be in the mix for the UVA job, but that's off the table now. But coaches aren't leaving the Ivy League in the same way they were. Virginia, I think, did want to speak to Matt Madalon, but like, if you're Matt Madalon, what's the point of, why would you go anywhere? What do you, he's got everything he needs. So basically, my point largely is that like the Ivy League can compete in this area, same as Johns Hopkins can, in a way that it may not appear at face value, but it's like they're fine. Like a lot of people can get the things they can do with once you're below a certain tax bracket, and there are look lacrosse is a very it is a high income sport, but there's also a lot of guys in lacrosse who are not necessarily, like, they're not all wealthy. Like, they're not all in the high top 5, like 1% tax bracket.
Yeah, I mean, that was the joke we had when everyone was talking about Yale winning in 2018, and then we're pointing out, their whole team's public school guys.
Exactly, yeah, and it's like all of those public school guys that we're talking about. How they probably got into Yale?
probably for free.
Yes. Are they making under 125K, their families? Well, guess what? You got to go for free ride. I'm friends with Ivy League athletes that come from middle-class families and basically had to pay $600 in tuition. And this is 20 years ago. So
yeah, so they're Ivy League completely fine in this regard. So yeah, we went off in a bunch there with the UVA thing. I think
so any other highlights from the press conference before we move on?
No, the last one, and again, just to wrap it up. Being in a position where you have to fundraise is just a more fraught position to be in. When you have to deal with other people's willingness to give you money, that's just a different, a different position to be in, than these others. So I think this isn't to say I think UVA is going to be bad. I just think that, listen, it's like, I think a good example, I think Q's degree is a good example of this, of like look at kind of towards the end of the Desco era. It's like, once you swim in the deepest parts of the ocean, and I think Hopkins was a good example of this at time. I think, Maryland prior to Tillman taking over is a good example. Once you
Princeton, the now defending national champs, to an extent,
they're a little different. I guess my point here is that once you start to swim in the deepest parts of the ocean, going from having top 5 recruiting classes every year to top 10 recruiting classes every year is a difference. Like, there is a difference there. The level that Notre Dame and Duke and UNC and Princeton are swimming in, if you're a step below that, you're in a pretty good spot. If you're 2 steps below that, that begins to get a little tricky. It's like UVA was about 1 step below that. Even honestly, a couple years ago, they were right there in that mix. What happens if they start to fall 1 or 2 steps below that? Is, I think, UVA's rosters the past couple of years have still been kind of chock full of those types of recruits, and they've fallen off a little bit. What if the talent level also dips that they're bringing in? That becomes a tricky question. The last thing from the press conference was what is Dom Starsia?
Yeah, Dom Starsia out of nowhere shows up.
I don't know why Dom. If I was Dom, I'd be like, I'm good, man. God bless him he loves the program, but I would have been I'm 70 years old, dude. It's May. It's May 3rd. I'm just gonna go to the beach. I'm gonna play golf. But all time incredible quote by Dom. He's like, there are a lot of people out there in the world that think they know all the answers. I'm a little closer to you than most of them, and I don't know all the answers. Is that an endorsement? Is that I won a national championship here.
It's like Dom saw Tierney show up at Final Four weekend there in Charlottesville to support Princeton and said, you know what? I should do that too.
Man, Big Bill
I'm going to show up to this press conference.
Big Bill was iced out with the sunglasses. Oh man, he was beast. And sunglasses when it was raining all weekend too.
Yes.
Big Bill, what a beast. So, but yeah, Dom being a lot of people claim they, know all the answers. I don't know all the answers, and I worked here. Dom, I don't know what to do with that, Dom. What does that mean?
Yeah,
exactly. Is that a good thing?
So, in other words, they've just created more speculation over this and just made this even more of a storm whirling around of what the heck's going on. I mean, we did say at the beginning of the season, Virginia had the weirdest vibes. You had no idea what direction the season would go in. They end up becoming the 5 seed when all is said and done, and depart from Tiffany, and the vibes are even weirder. It's incredible.
Now they're doing the which I sort of get, but it's a little weird. They're doing they're mentioning all the guys that are returning, which is a little.
I know, they're making social media posts with the full graphics and everything of returning.
It's was he going anywhere? Was I led to believe? It's very
not even football teams do this when usually
they
do
in
football or basketball, when guys
they do football and basketball will. You don't see it in lacrosse though, really. You don't see in lacrosse, being yeah, we're bringing this guy back. It's I would assume he's at Virginia. Where was he going? He wasn't in the transfer portal. None of these guys were in the transfer portal, which is also it. It's if they were in the transfer portal, that'd sort of be one thing, but none of them were in the portals to begin with. So yeah, that was something. What else we got?
We got our Tewaaraton winners. So Sean Light becomes the first male defenseman to win the Tewaaraton. Madison Taylor of Northwestern wins the women's Tewaaraton. Yeah, just a weird year for the Tewaaraton, so I guess they go with Light. But at the same token, he didn't have the best NCAA tournament. But I guess, I don't know. Then none of the 5 candidates really had a good NCAA tournament. I guess you could say Kabiri a bit, but their games were here shut down. So it's like, I guess, a matter of, I guess, go with Light. But I would argue, you know who this whole tournament kind of just cheered out. You know who you should have probably nominated for the Tewaaraton?
Yep.
Ryan Croddick.
If you were gonna nominate a Princeton guy, Croddick was the guy to nominate. Like, yeah, because to me, it's like
I said all
had
year.
An awesome.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like I said all year, it should have been like a Connor Hellebuck winning the Hart situation. Croddick's their MVP, and he was the reason why they won the tournament. Whereas you nominated Kabiri, and Kabiri had a great, was great, but you could argue he was like the 3rd or 4th or 5th most important guy on the team this May compared to Croddick, at the very least.
Kabiri's thing is that I do think he is the central hub of that offense. Like, it does flow out from him, but it's a bit of a situation where, if you watch them in this tournament, who would you have said was their best offensive player?
Palumbo.
Probably. And I'm not saying he is for sure, but I think you could make that argument. I think Tucker Wade had an argument there. It's like everybody, that was part of the whole thing with their offense, was everybody eats and they share the ball so well. They're like, yes, Kabiri is sort of the signature of that he does have the most assists on the team. The ball's kind of in his stick more than anybody else to a degree. I mean, nobody on that offense really has the ball in their stick all that often, but it's like, I do think that was fair. It was like at the end of the NCAA tournament with Princeton, we were talking like, who was really their best player? It was a difficult question. It's like, I don't know who Princeton's really best. Like, for McMeekin was hugely consequential for them when he did the face-off that.
Yeah.
But it's like the most unique, irreplaceable player was Croddick, because he was like, if I pulled Kabiri out, Palumbo and Burns and Wade are still there. If I pull Palumbo out, Kabiri and Burns and Wade are still there. If McMeekin, to be fair, there. If I pull some of their defensive guys out, they still had a couple really good pulls. There was no replacing Croddick. At least this season. Maybe next year they can, Madalon does a great job with goalies, and they have a great track record there. But yeah, I think, to me, if you were going to nominate a Princeton guy, Croddick was the guy to nominate. And then I think the issue would have really taken care of itself about like who to give the torch to, because like Croddick wasn't great in the Penn State game,
but he still made some big saves in the end too. Even though
and then Final Four weekend, he saves 33 saves and gives up 16 goals, which is a 67% save percentage. That's Tillman Johnson-esque on the Final Four. Like, so I agree. I think Croddick probably should have got it. I would have been fine if Spalina got it, because I think he was probably the most consistent offensive player throughout the duration of the season. Kabiri would have been fine too, though I think, it would have been a bit weird. Sean Light is awesome. I tweeted this out. I've mentioned this quite a bit this week, and some people push back on it. My thing with Light is that I just think he's used in such a narrow way by Notre Dame that I don't feel like he's the championship game is the perfect example to me. Princeton didn't even try to dodge him, and it didn't matter. They scored 16 goals anyway. And it's like all he did was just follow Kabiri around the entire game, and Kabiri didn't dodge him because he was like, I don't need to dodge you. And so, did Light win his matchup? And I don't really think he did, because it's like, I don't think Kabiri was ever interested in playing the matchup. It was like, what's what we've been saying, the war games thing, the only way to win is not to play. I think teams have started to figure that out with Light, where it's like, yes, if you try and dodge him, you will get taken away, because he is, I agree, he is the best 1v1 cover guy in the entire country. I definitely agree with that. But when teams have decided to not 1v1 dodge you, and I look at Light, he doesn't cause a lot of turnovers. He doesn't really guard anybody else. He doesn't deviate from his matchup. You contrast this with a guy like Gavin Adler a couple years ago, who, like, I remember that championship game that Cornell played against Maryland 22. Adler was he was a freaking fire hose. Like, anybody who got hot on Maryland, they were just like, you go cover him. Okay, somebody else got hot. Go cover him now. Light is really locked into his matchup. I'm not saying Light couldn't cover other people, but Notre Dame doesn't ask him to. And he's not really involved in their clear either. And now some people's counter this was, it's hard to lead your team and cause turnovers when they don't dodge you. And it's like, I guess sort of, but I look at a guy like Alex Ross for Penn State. Teams don't really dodge him. He still leads them and cause turnovers, and he's involved in their clear. I think Light could do a lot more than what Notre Dame asked him to do. He's kind of like a hammer. Other defenders are sort of the scalpel. He's the hammer, and he does that really well, but it's a bit, at times I feel it's a bit one note, and I think Notre Dame pays for it. And so I'm happy that the defender won, at least because it puts it on the table for the future. There are other defenders in the past that I personally think would have been more worthy.
Gavin Adler.
Zaps, good one, Tucker Durkin, way back. So, he's a great player, no question. I don't want to make it seem like he's not, but I don't know. It just...
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, though, they kind of had their hands tied with this one, too, because...
They did. It was a week.
Yeah, and especially, like, the second that... Yeah, I mean... Seeing, with the statistics and everything. But I think, for instance, the second that Duffy got hurt, kind of took him out of the mix.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second Cornell got knocked out first round, that kind of took Firth out of the mix.
And he really in particular got shut down in that game by Luke Martin. So yeah. The year. To me, the problem was this was the year. I agree in one sense. They took it as this was the year to not give it to an offensive player. The problem was that it shouldn't have been only one non-offensive player should have been
nominated. Yeah.
Like, Aiden McGuire won the USILA Player of the Year. You could argue for him to be a nominee in that case. Ryan Croddick, I think, should have been Princeton's nominee. I think if your 5 was Croddick, Light, Spallina, Firth, and maybe one other non-offensive player, I think you would have had a really good distribution of the way this year shook out. Instead, they went with 4 offensive players in a year where none of us really felt like there was a great offensive player.
Yeah.
And then they swerved at the end. And so it was just kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, the Duffy one was defensible because we didn't have the hindsight that he was hurt, in the NCAA tournament, but still, where's McGuire? And then if he's the USILA Player of the Year, how did he get the top 5 in Tewaaraton?
And it's interesting. There has started to be a bit of a split now. 2 of the last 3 years, there's been a split with the USILA and the Tewaaraton, which used to not be the case. For a while there, it was like 1-1, but now last year we had 2 years ago, Zappatella won the USILA Player of the Year, and Pat Cav won the Tewaaraton, and then this year McGuire. This year was 2. It's the first time no offensive player has won either award since maybe ever. Because the Tewaaraton has always gone to I guess unless maybe didn't Shanahan win it one year, but he was like midfielder, do everything, face off, and so I think this is the first time ever that no offensive player has done it. It honestly does reflect on the nature of the way the sport's kind of leaned the past couple of years. Offense has been down. I think I want to see where. Here we go. This past year, there were 22.5 goals per game scored in D1. In 2025, there were 22 goals per game. That is, if you compare it to prior seasons, that's about almost a full goal per game down from 2024 when it was 23.2. About 1.5 goals per game down from the high was 2023 when there were 24 goals per game. 23.8 in 2021, 23.1 in 2020. 23.8 in 2022, 23.1 in 2021. So I think you can look at some of that and be like COVID, like the super seniors sticking around and that kind of incredible concentration of offensive talent we had there for a couple of years. I think defenses have just adjusted prior to the shot clock and have started to play better, better defense. But it's definitely tilted the past couple of years back towards defense. Still above the shot clock. In the last 4 years of the shot clock, no season had above 21 goals per game. So the shot clock has basically introduced 2 extra goals per game from that. So I think it's interesting to kind of, and you look at next year, you still have Firth back, Duffy, Kabiri, but no, Spleen. It does feel like the past couple of years there has, this kind of who's the best offensive player. It's not the conversation it was when there was Teat and Sowers and Ament and Bernhardt and on and on.
All righty. So that's about it with and Richmond. Dan Chamati is going to be sticking around Richmond.
Dan Chamati got a contract extension, long-term agreement. For the future, they didn't give a specific, time on it. This is, I believe, the 3rd contract extension he's signed. He signed one in 2017, signed a new 5-year deal. That was after, during the early days of the program. And then I think he had to have signed another one since. Maybe not. Maybe he signed because 5 years in 2017 would take him through 2022. Yeah, they would have had to re-up him again at some point. And I think I think he got one in there again, kind of when a program, because programs have kind of been sniffing him around basically every year. So he gets one again here. Obviously kind of tied with the UVA opening kind of coming up and maybe some other programs looking at him. Terry Foy also tweeted out that he said this wasn't the last thing Richmond was going to do as far as staff-wise, which to me sounds like Paul Richards, who was apparently in the mix for the Fairfield job. Maybe they're going to do quite a bit to keep him as well. So obviously, Richmond, look, we know this. Richmond recognized what they have with Chamati. They're doing everything they can to keep him. Look, I still think if the Duke job comes open, or when the Duke job comes open, if he is who they choose to go after, I think it's going to be really hard for him to say no to that. I just think being a Duke alum, having the program like that Duke is at this moment in time, or has definitely been, I just think Duke's a top 5 job in the country, and it's his alma mater. That's really, really hard to say no to. Mm-hmm. So I still will stick by that. I think I'm not saying he's going to leave for sure. I think the Duke thing would just be so hard to say no to. What I think this indicates is that, and look, we've talked about this a lot on the show the past, couple of years. I think if Duke doesn't come after him, or maybe Duke promotes from within, Matt Dino, Caputo, maybe they go for somebody else. I don't know. I think there's a chance he's at Richmond for, another 10 years. Because listen, he's turned down. He had the opportunity to go down the process with Johns Hopkins. He didn't do it. He had the opportunity here with Virginia. Granted, I don't know that Virginia really. I don't know if Virginia really put its best foot forward with this whole thing. So maybe it wasn't quite. He didn't see it as like Virginia, the way we would have saw it. But I I think that this is kind of like I think this is just sort of like a rubber stamp on what we've already talked about. Is that, like, if the Duke job comes open, I still think if I'm a Richmond fan, I'm kind of, I'm clenching my butt. Like I think that's be such a difficult thing to turn down. But if not, yeah, I think you could easily feel that he's going to be at Richmond for another 10 years, and he thinks that he's got what he needs to be successful. He obviously had a team this year that was a top 5 team, got to number 1 in the country. They didn't get past the first round, which is pretty tough. And I do think that next year probably is more towards a rebuilding year. But yeah, I think this is just like a sort of like a confirmation of what we already know, which is that it's going to take a hell of a package to get him out of Richmond if it happens. And I'll still say I think the only one that might be the case is Duke.
All right. So now we have to put a bow on the season. So since we last saw everyone with the Saturday Power Hour after the semifinals, Princeton is your national champs for the first time in 25 years after a 16-9 win over Notre Dame in the national championship game with the 11-0 run for the ages. Before we go big picture on this, I think it's kind of interesting to think of different turning points of this season for Princeton. Would it be the finally beating Maryland, finally beating Syracuse, the comeback against Harvard, the late comeback against Harvard, finally beating Cornell, the University of Delaware PA system blasting out Princeton's goal song for Penn State's 10th goal and not scoring again the rest of the game, or Madalon's timeout when Notre Dame went up 3-0 in the first 5 minutes? There's a lot of interesting turning points with this season for the Tigers.
I think the Harvard game is a good one to look at, because I think both, actually. I think losing to Cornell the first time, which is the last time they lost, and if you go after that, they beat Brown by 6, they beat Lehigh by 7, they beat Vermont by 14, they beat Penn by 12. They were a lot better than all those teams. Then they played the close game against Harvard. I think that losing to Cornell again, I think, really seemed to crystallize for this team, like, all right, it was like a last straw type deal. They're like, we have to get past these guys, and that everything that has been said about us, and we've kind of the expectations we've had put on us and the expectations that they put on themselves, and all that sort of thing. I think it really because you look at the Palumbo interview after they beat Yale in the Ivy League semifinal, and that, I think, is kind of probably their most identifiable moment of the season, when he's given that interview and he's like, he talked about like the effort you were going to see out of these guys, on Sunday, and that obviously materialized. They just absolutely destroyed them in that game. I don't know if that was a turning point per se, because I think that what this team needed to, I think the Maryland win was really big. Obviously, just avoid going 0-2, and that was a team that they had not beaten for so long, and then they kind of propelled that Maryland, that victory over Maryland into the win over Syracuse the next week. So I think that was obviously big. But something about that Cornell loss, I think, really set it up to them. We're like, all right, man, like, we have, like, enough's enough. If we want to be what we think we're going to be, we have to beat these guys. We just cannot lose to these guys again. And then I think that Harvard game towards the end of the season as well, if you lose that game, it maybe is kind of, I still think they win the title anyway, probably. But it is a bit of a kind of, like, if they lost that game, they would have been third in the Ivy League in the regular season, and they would have probably played Harvard again in the semifinal. Again, I think they would have beat them. Yes,
but that extra loss probably doesn't get them the 1 seed.
For sure, that part for sure.
Which would mean then you're getting into another boat race with Syracuse in the semifinal, where all bets are off. I mean, Princeton probably still beats Syracuse a second time, but you're adding up the degree of difficulty of getting into a track meet like last year's quarterfinal.
Yeah, the level to which they played towards the end of the season indicates to me I think they were going to win the title either way. They were just clearly the best team, but I think not taking a dip there in that game against Harvard, and then kind of using it as an ability to refocus, because after that game they blow out Dartmouth. The Yale game was close, but if we think about it, that Princeton outscored them 10-4 after they got down 6-2. Like once Princeton locked in. And then from there on, it was kind of just, blowout city, aside from the Penn State game, I guess. But yeah, I just think there were moments for this team where it felt like a light bulb, sort of like of team they needed to be. I think being able to finally beat Maryland, gutting out that Cuse win. The Cornell game to me is the obvious one, where it was just like that did feel like it became the avatar of their season. Losing to them again, at home again. And again, we talked about Cornell was just the better team. Like Cornell just outplayed them. And so having that one, I think really, it felt like it was something to them, or like enough's enough, dude. Like we cannot lose to these guys again. And so I think that kind of just that pocket of period where they lose to Cornell, then beating Harvard, avoiding that kind of slip up, keeping the momentum rolling, and then that last Cornell game. At that point, it was like, okay, this team is finally that last Cornell game, that Ivy League tournament weekend. Because remember, we did that. We were live Friday, and we were like, Princeton's best team, but it doesn't feel like we've seen the best version of this team yet. It feels like we're still waiting for Princeton at that moment in time didn't feel clear cut above everybody else. And because think about what Notre Dame was doing at that kind of period of time. Granted, Notre Dame did lose to Virginia, but Notre Dame had just got off beating Syracuse by 4, beating UNC kind of comprehensively.
Yeah, Richmond the 8-0 run to start.
Yeah, like what Notre Dame was putting up. You kind of going back to, you had UNC at that point, which was in a tricky spot. But if you remember that UNC Princeton game, Crosse had to make 25-something saves for Princeton to win. Princeton at that moment didn't feel totally clear of the field. When they
it was kind of funny because that live stream was when we were doing it when they were down 6-2. And then it's like once that stream ended is when we really got the best Princeton had to offer, and they just steamrolled through the tournament.
And then they beat Cornell, and it was like, okay, the team we saw in the second half against Yale in the Cornell game, that's what we've been waiting for. And if they can carry this through to the NCAA tournament, they will be they'll be the team to beat, and they certainly proved that by the way they played in May. I mean, I tweeted out their goal differential in the tournament is up there with some of the best teams of all time. I mean, their closest game was one they lost. They won by 4 goals. Granted, they did trail in the third and the fourth quarter, but they finished that with a 5-0 run, and other than that, they were dominant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the difference, because we saw a similar situation last year with Cornell, Ivy League school, long title drought, breaking it. But it felt like last year Cornell's was like an exorcism that felt like one big pile of relief getting off their shoulders, whereas this Princeton team, this NCAA tournament wasn't relief. It was just assertiveness that we're the best team in the country, you're not, and we're going to steamroll you.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, so it felt like last year with Cornell, it felt like, a weight off the shoulder, an exorcism, and a sigh of relief when everything was done. Great team, though, with Cornell, too. But with this Princeton team, it just felt like, yes, there was a title drought, but it wasn't about getting a weight off their shoulder as much as it was an assertiveness that we're better than you, and we're going to steamroll everything in front of our path to get there.
Yeah, Cornell played with I know that's not saying. In Cornell,
I don't want to take anything away from Cornell either, because that Cornell team was great and beat every team on their schedule and all that as well.
Cornell clearly, there was a burden that they had to get off their shoulder. With Princeton, I think it was more just, and I think it's a little different. This is predominantly a team of juniors, not a team of seniors. That was the big thing for Cornell. Was like that was the shot for Kirst and all those guys. They had to do it then, or else they wouldn't. For Princeton, they do lose some key pieces: Croddick, McMeekin, Palumbo. Those are some big pieces. But a lot of these guys come back again next year. They'll probably be the preseason number one to start 2027. Princeton played angry, really, in a way, and they played in the tournament. There was just an intensity and a ferocity with which they played that was really, really unique. And I think you really look at it, the ground balls, and that they were plus 15 in ground balls against Notre Dame in the first quarter, which is insane. And a lot of them were like rebounds and things, but like there were clear 3 or 4 pivotal ground ball type battles, which Princeton just won, and they were able to put on Notre Dame an avalanche in that first half. But there was someone, Terry Foy tweeted this out. Someone tweeted him like he compared Princeton to some of the great Maryland teams, but with a more of a freedom in how they played offensively. Just those Maryland teams are obviously much more usually buttoned up and deliberate and kind of conservative, whereas this Princeton team had a kind of a real unrestrained vibe to how they played. Yeah, I think, to me, I tweeted this out. To me, the story of this Princeton team is not like, yes, they were the most talented team. That became very evident by the end of this season. They had depth to them on the offensive ball that nobody else could match. A versatility in how they played. Like, they had no weaknesses anywhere on the field. But to me, what made them so impressive is that the story of why they were so great to me was not that they just had better players than everybody. Because I think they had better players. I think you could argue last year they had better players than everybody. They had basically this roster last year. And who was more? Maybe Cornell was more talented than them. I'm not sure Cornell was more talented than them. I think Cornell was more experienced. I think Cornell was sharper. I think you could argue they had the most talented team in the country last year too. The story to me Notre Dame was very talented themselves. The story of why Princeton won the title to me is that throughout each different part of the season, it felt like they checked a different box of how they had to play and to win. Early in the season, our big question at the start of the season was partly their defense, which we've had to get better, and then also that this team's identity was about playing both ways, playing a two-way style of lacrosse that was really physical and intense. And it felt like Princeton had got away from that last year to being more of just a kind of freewheeling offensive type team. The Cuse game is the best example of this. It's like, that's not, yes, Princeton has all this offensive talent, but the type of team they are at their best was not freewheeling, score 17 goals. It was, we can score 14 goals, but also really hit you and really make you, have to play a full field 60-minute type game. And they were able to do that at the beginning of the season. They kind of evidenced that by the win over Maryland and the win over Syracuse. And then later in the year, McMeekin was a question mark at different points for them, mostly last year. But towards the end of the year, he really became a strength of that team. The way he played in the Ivy League tournament in particular, the Ivy League championship game, that is kind of taking it to Jack Caskadon. And so, the defense, I think, is, their defensive midfield in May, I thought, was one of the hallmarks. Jackson Green, Cooper Muro, those guys really played their best. I kind of question, like, did they have enough gas in the tank? Because they played those guys so much, but they did. Throughout the season.
Is this the amount of pick sixes that they did, the defensive midfield, that set up transition goals?
I think that was the Penn State game. There were 2 goals in that Penn State game.
Both from Green with the literal pick sixes. Just take it from midair, room in the net.
And one of them was, in the fourth quarter, when that was like a 1-goal game that kind of maybe tied or something like that. That was a big momentum swing.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing with Princeton that you have to look at this tournament is, one, obviously the avalanches of goals that they go on. Once they got into a run, they were unstoppable. But 2, the amount of juice goals that they had, fast break goals, goals at the end of shot clocks, goals at the end of quarters. There were like 2 or 3 goals that they had in this tournament run with like 3 seconds or less left on the clock for the quarter. That completely swung the momentum their way too.
That to me is like, again, that's the evidence of a complete team, a team that can score in so many different ways. They could score with their offense. They could hit you with they on offense. They could score in different ways. They had like Tucker Wade. Tucker Wade's goal against Duke. 2 goals against Duke towards the end of that first half, just kind of solo efforts. They could beat you with ball movement. The way they just destroyed Notre Dame with ball movement in that first half of the championship. They could score juice goals, transition with their defense, their rope unit. It was by the end of the year.
Goals.
McMeekin, absolutely.
Yeah, McMeekin scored goals too. Yeah,
by the end of the year, it was a complete team.
And I think that's the thing. They had the best offense, but like that's where everything just came together. You got McMeekin winning at the faceoff X. You got Crosse being just playing out of his mind at goal. The defense, the D-middies. Then you add in the depth with the second midfield unit. It's like by the end of the season, there was not one weakness on this Princeton team and absolutely no room for you to exploit them. Really, the closest guy was Penn State catching Crosse on an off day, and that was really it.
And Penn State, Penn State cracked in that game. I mean, Penn State physically looked like they hit the wall in a way that Princeton did not. I mean, Penn State played them for about 50 minutes, 45, 46, 47, 48, 50 minutes. They played them straight up, and they may have been the slightly better team. But by the end, it was just,
and it's against it's against the stereotype because you think, the Big Ten team, the physicality, the Big Ten, the deeper rosters, they would have more in the tank at the end. No, it was Princeton by far in that one on a 90-degree hot day. They were the ones that were, not cramping up and had the fortitude to go forward. And I think that's the other thing that does it is the combination that they had like an offense like an ACC team combined with the physicality of a Big Ten team. And it felt like all those conference teams, stuck to their conference identities, but Princeton was the outlier of taking both those conference stereotypes and combining it into one squad.
Yeah, they were in a year. I think that's a great point. In a year where both those conferences, the ACC and the Big Ten, were very, very to type. Yeah, the ACC was a very offensive-driven league this year. And that's not to say the ACC teams didn't have good defenses too, or face-up guys. That's why the ACC had 3 teams in the Final Four. The Big Ten was a very, very defensive league this year, kind of as it was last year. Princeton was a complete unit, and it's like that was the ability to weaponize your strengths is, I think, a big factor. Carolina had Brady Wambach, but at a lot of different points, it sort of felt like, did Carolina get enough out of the offense despite having Brady Wambach? That was the point we often had. Like, in Carolina's offense is kind of just like, it's okay. It's good, but shouldn't, with that type of faceoff guy, shouldn't it be elite? Notre Dame had a great goalie in Thomas Ricciardelli, but there were times it felt like Notre Dame maybe could have played faster, could have done more in the transition, things like that. Princeton weaponized every area of their squad. Like Crosse being as good as he was meant that they were willing to take risks because they always felt like they had him as the safety net back there. When McMeekin really turned into a weapon and became, their what he was at the faceoff dot.
McMeekin was really like the happy found his putter this season. Once he got going.
And like when he did, that allowed them to really play aggressive, it propelled these runs forward. It took their offense to another level, from being one of the best offenses to the best offense. Every aspect of their team, it felt like they really harnessed into being a complete unit. The fact that they just had no weakness. They turned that into, one of their strengths, and they that's part of what we always talk about. It's the game management aspect of lacrosse. I think is one of the more less talked about and not kind of aspects of it, especially because with the shot clock now, it's sort of like, well, nobody really stalls anymore, plays a lot slower. It's like there's still ways within the game that you can really tilt the conditions of it to your favor. And I think Princeton really did that this year by being able to kind of morph and to play different styles depending on the type of game that was needed. And I thought, look, there's a reason they were as dominant as they were. By the end, They were just so good in so many different areas. And yeah, I think it's also it was cool to see a team that the identity of this Princeton group for the past, the first 2 years of their careers was, man, these guys are so talented. They have so many great pieces. They score so many goals. What a fun team to watch. Imagine what this team, could be in yada yada X amount of years. It was really cool to see them this year become that type of team, and to put it all together to being one of the better national championship teams that we've seen.
Yeah. And I mean, we've been alluding that to the past couple of years, like, wait till this 4-year stretch with this Princeton class. And the potential was there. And then they lived up to it by really putting together one of the most dominant runs. So let's take this a little bit further back, because I think Princeton's a very, very interesting case study. And I think if you've listened to us since we started off the podcast in 2016 and really see the path of all of this, said this the day of Memorial Day: the greatest rebuild of a program job will forever be Bill Tierney's.
Well, that wasn't even that wasn't really a rebuild as much as a build. I mean, there wasn't anything. Princeton never made the NCAA tournament before Bill Tierney was there.
Yeah, but in terms of like a program rebuild, Matt Madalon as probably the best rebuild job we've ever seen in college lacrosse. Do you want to argue that, or do you
let's
agree
do
with
the.
that?
I mean, no, I think that's a good. Let's do the other ones. Lars Tiffany. Virginia hadn't won an NCAA tournament game in the last 40 years under Dom Starja. Hadn't won an ACC. Won one ACC game in how many years? All the off the field kind of issues that sort of went along with that. And then he won 2 national championships in his first 5 sort of years. It does have to be mentioned, as much as we kind of give him grief, Joe Bresci at North Carolina. You look at where North Carolina was in the Joe Bresci got to UNC in 2009. UNC hadn't made a Final Four by that point in 16 years. They had only won 2 NCAA tournament games in the previous 12 years, and there was at one point a stretch from 99 to 03 where UNC won 5 years without making the tournament, from 99 to 03. Only made it once in a stretch of 99 to 06. So the team had kind of turned around a little bit towards the end of John Austin. But here's another case. UNC had not won an ACC game for 5 years by the time Bresci took over. And Bresci got them pretty much right off, from the jump. He won 12 games, got to the quarterfinals his first year, 13 games, got to the quarterfinals his second year, and then just kind of year in, sort of year out from that point had, really, really good teams. So I think Bresci's in there. I think Lars is in there. Kind of, sort of Jeff Tambroni at Cornell. You look at Cornell in the 90s, I think actually is the example of a program that really lost its luster in the 90s. So the decade of the 90s, Cornell did not win an NCAA tournament game. Dave Petramala started this sort of resurgence there by his last year getting them back to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 5 years. But when Tams made the quarterfinals there, it was their first quarterfinal appearance in 14 years. And when they hadn't made a Final Four since '88 when he got there. It was 20 years when he finally made the Final Four. So I think Tams at Cornell, Lars at UVA, Bresci at UNC, Madalon at Princeton. I think those are the ones. I think if you wanted to make the case for Madalon, I don't disagree at all. I actually think I probably would agree. But make the case for the context.
I would say, because you think about when he started off, the program was nowhere near the statue that they were in the 90s and early 2000s, and even mid to late 2000s or the beginning of the decade. They made 2 NCAA tournaments the first 3 years of the decade. and things were falling apart. They were getting left behind, and not just nationally, but even in the Ivy League. Yale had taken their place. Penn had taken their place. They were missing Ivy League tournaments.
Yes.
And even in the first couple of years of his reign, he had to, navigate through that. And it wasn't really until, 2019, the things were starting to fall into piece. 2020 was looking like the magical year. Then COVID hit. And, of course, they lost the 2021 season, too. And it felt like, well, was that 2020 season just going to be a flash in the pan, and that was Princeton's last shot, and COVID ruined it? Because remember, there's a lot of doom and gloom over the Ivy League, and are the Ivy schools going to put any emphasis on athletics after COVID if they completely wiped out the year, even though it's a year after COVID, everyone's vaxxed up, and we're still not playing? Is going forward, is the Ivy League going to put any emphasis on lacrosse or any other sport for that matter? Well, the next year, that answer was emphatically a complete disagreement of that, because Ivy got 6 teams into the tournament and Princeton made the Final Four. And then I think the difficult thing was making sure that was keeping that consistent. And Madalon did so, making the tournament in 23 and 24, back into a national power 25, and doing what they did now in 26. And you saw it bubbling in the surface. The recruiting classes that were coming in were getting stronger and stronger for Princeton, and it felt like this can't be ignored anymore. It's consistently top 5 recruiting classes coming in. Eventually, something's going to go their way. You can't be stringing together top 5 recruiting classes and not get anything added, even if it's just, Final Four appearances. Princeton's going to be back to being a national player soon. And think about it this way. Let's say you're on our preseason pod for 2016. And I told you that out of the following teams, Duke, Denver, Syracuse, Johns Hopkins, and Princeton. Guess which one of these 5 is going to be the next one? And you could throw in Loyola too. Guess which one of these 6 schools is going to win the national title next?
Yeah, especially Duke
Princeton.
and Denver. Duke and Denver, what they had just done.
You would have absolutely stormed off the podcast if I made that take.
Well, no, it's because I think you have to really contextualize where Princeton was for this to kind of grasp it. Is like, look at Syracuse this decade, and we talk about the amazing job this senior class did in turning around everything, and I agree with that. It's like Syracuse had 2 bad seasons. Really, when we think about it, maybe like they won 4-11, which is was a terrible season, the worst season in Syracuse history. Then the next year, with all of these guys as freshmen, they won 8 games, and they were bubble. They were one of the 2nd or 3rd teams out in the bubble. Something like that.
But good progress, though.
Yeah. It was a team full of freshmen. It was a team full of freshmen that was a top 20-ish type squad. Syracuse from 2008 to 2021 never missed the NCAA tournament. Through all the 2010s where Syracuse is that decade where Cuse didn't win a national title. Here were Cuse's seasons. First round loss as a 2 seed, quarterfinal loss as a 1 seed, first round loss, runner up, first round loss as a 2 seed, quarterfinal, first round loss, and then 21 first round loss. That's still 13 straight NCAA tournament appearances. They were a top 10 team in all but 1 or maybe 2 of those seasons. Syracuse missed the tournament for 2 years, and they were back in the quarterfinal. It's all things considered, I know it maybe didn't feel that way at the time. That was a really quick, turnaround. Even Johns Hopkins, which obviously has had a really long, Final Four drought, an even longer championship drought. Hopkins' longest streak of missed tournaments is 2. They missed Milliman's first year, they missed his second year, and then they made the quarterfinals the next 2 years. Even those I agree, those Petro teams have been underperforming towards the end. They still were on a streak of 6 straight NCAA tournaments made. Virginia, which we talked about, I mentioned Lars's turnaround there. Longest streak of missed tournaments, 2. Virginia had won when Lars had taken over. Virginia had won a national title within the past 5 years of that. Princeton, this is where I think, you get into the Cornell kind of with Tams, and then maybe to a degree UNC. Princeton had missed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 consecutive NCAA tournaments. Princeton went a decade without winning an NCAA tournament game.
And also, 2010s, they had 2 appearances in the 2010s, 0 wins.
0 wins. And to me, this was part of why, to also go, like, to further boast my point about, like, why I was always with, Princeton, like, against it, was like, they had Tom Schreiber and Michael Sowers. And that's not, like, that in all of it. Like, Tom Schreiber, Michael Sowers, Zach Currier.
Zach Currier never played in an NCAA tournament game.
Michael Sowers didn't either. And, like, yes,
Michael Sowers played 2.
He
played
Duke.
1.
None of Princeton.
Michael Sowers didn't because he transferred to Duke. I thought you were saying Schreiber, who played in.
Yeah, Schreiber played in 1. Tom Schreiber played in 1 NCAA tournament game.
A game that Princeton scored 4 goals in. I think it was 5-4. Virginia won that game or something like that.
Yeah, it was pretty.
That was, and Princeton lost on a blocked shot, like it was hockey.
Let me look it up. Virginia won 6-5. Yeah. Here's the best way. In 2010, as the 6th seed, Chris Bates' first year, Princeton lost to Notre Dame 8-5. It was Princeton's first NCAA tournament home loss ever. It's the first time they'd ever lost a home game in the tournament. They wouldn't win a tournament game again for another decade. And the talent level there was, well, yes, they didn't have the depth maybe of these guys. The high-end talent level was just as good. I mean, I didn't even mention guys like Mike McDonald or Kip Orban or Gavin, Ryan Embler, like these guys. Like, there were really freaking good players on those Princeton teams. Austin said, like, there were tons of different guys to where it was like, what is missing here? It's like, because if you told me, like, oh, they just need to get better players, it's like, they have great players. Like, like,
they had Tewaaraton finalists in years where they were nowhere near making the NCAA tournament. And
that's also the thing, is like, there were seasons in there where Princeton missed the tournament where you could have been like, 2015 is a good example. They were like the last team left out. 2017, Sowers' freshman year, they were in there. There were also years in there where they just, like, weren't relevant. Like, they weren't, like, the Gates thing with Cuse always quits, like, we're relevant again. I don't feel like Cuse ever really slipped into true irrelevancy. Maybe 2022 that was the one year. Princeton was truly irrelevant. Like, they just were not a factor. And for a programs of that stature usually don't fall into that. They might fall off. We talked about Cuse fell off a bit. Hopkins fell off a bit. Virginia fell off a bit. Programs of that stature do not become irrelevant in the degree to which Princeton did. And then Madalon's a good, examples. Like, he had been there for 3 years before the 20s. Like, that was his 4th year when that Sowers thing took over. So it was also like, we all kind of liked Madalon, but it was sort of like Madalon's first 3 years there, they were 24-18, and in the Ivy League, they were 9-9. It was fine. Like, it was completely, and honestly, like, you look at the records, it was getting worse. 4-2 in 2017, 3-3 in 2018, 2-4 in 2019, as far as Ivy League, records. So that's why it felt so kind of stunning, is that the degree to which they fell off was really hard to conceptualize.
And I know that people say, well, institutional factors behind it, that's why Tierney left and everything, but that doesn't tell the whole picture, because I feel like Princeton athletics as a whole, as an institution, they were still supporting the women's programs at that time. They were loading up on men's basketball, and to the point where you saw the fruits of that labor end up with a Sweet 16 run a couple of years ago. The women's basketball team went undefeated in this stretch where the men's lacrosse team fell off a cliff during the regular season, and has been consistently top 25. But I guess, something was amiss with the men's lacrosse program, though, between the institution and the program. Because I think, it's one thing if it's the athletic department, but there are other programs within the Princeton University athletics.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's
Yeah.
Let's
Ole,
go.
ole, ole,
Get out of here,
ole, ole.
Thank God. Bad enough we're going to have to deal with the Carolina Hurricanes.
Arsenal FC, get in the mud.
Thank God.
Wow. One shot on goal in the Champions League final in the 5th minute.
Hate to
Get out of
see
here.
it.
Get out of here.
Hate to see it.
When my team had one shot on goal in the Champions League final, we somehow won the thing.
Many are calling Arsenal corner kick merchants.
Hey, man, you're hearing them more and more.
So where was I going with this? But I think though there is a bit of a point though that look, this is Princeton University. It's a world-renowned university. Okay? Goes all the way back to its roots in Enlightenment thinking, pumping out James Madison and that Enlightenment thought and all the great politicians, economists, scientists through the years. But at the same heart of it, it's also a proud athletic college. Its identity is built on athletics. They played in the first college football game, 20-some-odd football national titles. They're the school of Hobie Baker. They're the school of Bill Bradley. They're the school of 6 NCAA men's lacrosse championships. They're one of only 7 now. I'm saying this is, predating this year. One of only, 4 schools to win the men's and women's lacrosse double. That's part of your identity. And thankfully, I think after seeing what happened with COVID, I think this is where the institutional support kicks in, is they saw that they had something there the Sowers year, the 2020 year. And I don't know if there's any truth to this, but I'm sure behind the scenes, they realized, look, men's lacrosse is part of our school's identity. We have a robust athletic program. This is going back to what we were saying a little bit earlier with, some of these ACC and Big Ten schools. That's part of our university's identity. It's not just that we're a world-renowned academic school. We've got a rich, proud athletic history, too. And men's lacrosse is one of the bedrocks of that. Let's put in the resources to get to where we need to be back. And sure enough, from 2022 onward, they've made the NCAA tournament every year. Outside of Georgetown, they've got the longest streak in NCAA tournament appearances. Like, imagine saying that in 2019. Princeton's got a longer NCAA tournament streak than anyone in the ACC, anyone in the Big Ten, including Maryland.
Yeah.
And, including Maryland, including Virginia, including Notre Dame, including Duke, including Syracuse. And here they are now with a dominant national title. They're consistently getting in top five recruiting classes. They've reestablished themselves ahead of Yale and Harvard. We were putting in them and Penn, getting themselves back into, at the very worst, a 1B with Cornell. This year, definitely back to 1A. And now they've got a great foundation. And now it's gone from a place where you felt like, if Madalon finds success, the second an ACC or a top-tier Big Ten job's open, he's going to bolt down. Well, guess what? Now that they've got the institutional support, it's back to being one of the best jobs in the nation.
For sure. I think it's about the degree to which they've been able to harness all of the things that harness all of those advantages you talked about. It felt they felt ordinary in the 2010s. They didn't feel like they had an identity. It went all the way down to the jerseys they wore, which sucked.
Oh yeah, the Warrior jersey. So one aside about the crowds, I think that what they call the orange line, the alumni support really ramped up this year. I mean, everyone who's known friends of the pod, Jimmy and Tommy Davis from Levittown. I always reference them from the late Tierney era. The alumni support was there. Last year I was watching it with Jimmy Davis, the quarterfinal game with him. So this alumni support's always been there, but I've never seen it that shown out where the whole section is just in old jerseys. Now, albeit the really crappy Warrior jerseys, but all the old jerseys in the crowd and all the alums that showed up. Yes, there was the 25th anniversary of the 2001 team, but just across the board, all the alums coming out and finally having a reason to come out to this. And I think, again, this is going into that institutional support.
And this has really been a story with them post. I remember 2022, they had some great crowds there. And you saw, especially when the students really was, one of the unique things that not just the alumni, but the student sections I always feel have been really impressive for Princeton. Safe talks about that a bunch because he goes to a lot of the games. It felt like it took Madalon some time, and this is where sometimes patience is a virtue, and you have to let a coach, work through it and make a connection to the fan base and to the alumni and get them on his side.
Yeah, because I think that's the thing too, is like Princeton alum are extremely proud of being Princetonians. As I said, I'm friends with some Princeton alums, and they are as devoted to their university. They're on a tier in the Northeast with, I would say, Penn State and Syracuse and Notre Dame grads, and to an extent like UConn grads, of never shutting up about where they went to. Now, yes, there's, you could say, oh, it's Ivy elitism. Not really. They rock the sweatshirts all the time, and it's not a matter of, oh, it's the Ivy elitism as much as it is how much in love they were about their 4 years at the college.
Yeah, I just think it took time for that. But once they got that into place, they were really able to harness all of the advantages that Princeton has to offer. And I do think I think as on the whole of the Ivy League schools over the past, it's been about, you notice this trend in the 2010s with a lot of these Ivy League schools. It was often about it's just the admission standards. It's just so much harder to get talent in with like what's the admissions things that are required. That was a big reason that coaches left the league, was they didn't feel like the talent level they could bring in was the same at our schools. Now it's become about getting the university to be like, no, we can use this as a tool that makes our school better and better, advertising, things like that for our program. And so now we talked about the Ivy League really has leveraged the financial aid opportunities to bring in really strong recruiting classes. Yale was the first one to really, do this. Andy Shea, what they were able to do, and Shea worked really hard at that. And you've seen it, since with Cornell and with Cornell and Princeton. I think you're going to see more and more with the other schools as well. And so, I just think it's a broader story about the way that the Ivy League has kind of turned things around there, and leaned into the successes that their schools can provide, but also about Princeton specifically. But Madalon, it took time, but he was able to build a program and an identity that now, they feel like they have, ever since 2020, they feel like they have an identity again. And that's the thing, is like, to why, if you go back and listen to those old pods, I was always so down on Princeton. It's like, because I didn't know what Princeton was. And that was part of it, was that we talked about like Bill Tierney, the greatest, building of any program in NCAA history. You look at it through that lens, that before Bill Tierney showed up, Princeton wasn't on the map. And then he made it the most dominant program in the country. And then Bill Tierney left and Princeton wasn't on the map. And so Matt Madalon in 2022 became the first Princeton coach other than Bill Tierney to win an NCAA tournament game. Like that's the context with which we were in, was that Princeton won when they had the greatest coach of all time. Prior to that, they didn't. And for 10 years after that, they didn't. When you operate within that context, it really was hard to look at Princeton as like, I mean, are they a great job? Or was it just literally the greatest coach of all time coach there for, And now, obviously, all of it, looks obvious. It's like, this is Princeton. It's one of the best universities in the world. It's in the Ivy League. It's in New Jersey, which is a state that has
you're literally and you're literally in between, halfway between New York and Philadelphia and Princeton.
Precisely. Like it all adds up now that you see, and Madalon has been able to do that. He's been able to leverage everything, and he's been able to cement it as Today, 100%. They're a top 10 job, at worst, the top 10 job in the country.
And I think one other thing to show it too, I think if you want a literal proof of it, look at how much they've leveled up Class of 52 Stadium in the past 15 years or so. Compare a picture from where it was about 15 years ago. Still had AstroTurf until like 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Like the women had to play at Princeton Stadium. It was that bad with that AstroTurf. Then putting the resources into having the best surface in the NCAA. We love that surface at Princeton, turf there.
It's great.
Installing the big scoreboard on the sideline. The fan amenities there,
having like seats. They don't really have seats as much, but they don't, the scoreboard. Yeah, like before there wasn't like anything. It was just like the woods.
Here's the woods.
Bury somebody.
That's why we call it the Camp of 52 campground.
You could like freaking bury somebody out there in the woods. They wouldn't find you.
Yeah. But the way that they've just added the amenities there, I think they decreased I think they redid the bleachers a little bit because I remember going in high school and it felt like it was bigger and it was like, taller up and everything. I think downsizing it made it a bit more intimate and better viewing experience too. Correct me if I'm wrong, Princeton folks. I think they redid the bleachers when they did the renovations with the turf and everything. But now it's a wonderful place to spend to watch a game. Cozy environment, raucous crowds. As you said, the student section always shows out. And I think because of Princeton student population, it's fun to see like a diverse group of students coming up and showing as well from all different backgrounds.
Absolutely.
And I think that makes it a really unique thing too, international too, with Princeton's international population. So it really is a real, I think, in terms of, I think it would be cool if they get another, go back to playing a game a year at Princeton Stadium. But Class of 52's made itself as one of the best lacrosse only environments since they did the renovations, and especially since they've leveled up in the past decade, especially, with the big scoreboard and everything.
I mean, their attendance this year, they were above 1,000 for every game this year, which not every school can say that, especially when you think about, and Princeton's a program, like you think about the schedule they play, like they always have a good home slate usually, but it always happens early in the season. They don't really, especially with the Cornell game being where it is, Princeton doesn't really play a great kind of, They get over 1,000. They get over 1,000 people minimum to all their big games. 2,000 sometimes. The really big ones, without any of them happening in April. What was the game you went to? The Syracuse game this year had like 11.
I wasn't at this year's.
Yeah, but the one you went to, it had 2,500, which I think is about. Yeah, I think it used to be 4,000. I think 25, 26 is like the.
Yeah, that was pretty packed out. The one in 2023.
Yeah. But that gives you an idea of like, imagine if they got to play Syracuse, Cornell, Maryland, and Carolina, all these teams they play, in April and not, the Maryland game.
They should be playing Syracuse in April instead of February, but they should be playing Cornell in April instead of March. I think I think they got to get rid of that. But, no, like they draw really good crowds there. It's a great environment. They need to get them on TV more, for sure. By the way, complete aside, Chelsea really tweeted that.
Oh, that was so sick, dude.
I'm hoping Tottenham just posts a picture of the Europa League trophy from last year now.
Crystal Palace should post a picture of their Conference League trophy.
Yes, Crystal Palace with their every year title. Yes. Oh, so where were we going with this? So
where would you, unless you have anything else that you were mentioning? I was
going to get into the TV in a second, but
where would you stack up this Princeton team all time? Because I think this is a pretty.
Yeah, I mean, the way that they play this NCAA tournament and avenge their only 2 losses this month of May puts them really in high air. I mean, they had a more dominant tournament than the 2022 Maryland undefeated team.
Sort of. I mean,
Sort of,
Maryland's goal. Here, I can tweet out the goal differential by. Let me get it up. Get out here somewhere. Yeah, can I get it? Let me see. There we go.
Okay.
Princeton's NCAA tournament goal differential was plus 27. Some other notable champions will do the 16-team tournament era. 24 Notre Dame was plus 27, so the same. 22 Maryland was plus 32. 06 Virginia was plus 31. And 2005 Hopkins was plus 28.
Yeah, so probably not in the same era that as the 2022 Maryland or the 2005 Hopkins or maybe even 2024 Notre Dame. But that's good. That's a good place to be if we're saying you're not as good as them. That's some good air to be in.
I think that 24 Notre Dame is actually a good, because 24 Notre Dame, this Princeton team also, like 24 Notre Dame, beat every team on their schedule. They avenged the Penn State and Cornell losses, like Notre Dame avenged the Georgetown loss. Their NCAA tournament dominance is pretty similar. If you look at it, like dominant championship game performance, which we didn't really talk about the championship game itself, it was one of the most incredible halves of lacrosse I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was from the, as I said, with the Madalon timeout after Notre Dame went up 3-0, they pitched the perfect game. The rest of that half, it was just awestruck.
They beat them everywhere, every inch of the field. They dominated. But if you look at that Notre Dame team, dominant championship game performance. The first half, Notre Dame Denver was actually pretty close. I think it was a 1-goal game, kind of like Princeton Duke was. Then Princeton strolled. Quarterfinal for Notre Dame was a bit more easier win than Princeton Penn State was in the first round. More dominant for Princeton. If you look towards that Notre Dame 24 team, really close games they had, I would say would be Ohio State by 3, sort of. Beat Syracuse by 2, Duke by 3, the Cornell game, and then at Virginia. Notre Dame had games decided by, let's say, 3 goals or fewer. 5 for that Notre Dame team. It was just once kind of very similar. When May hit, that 24 Notre Dame team just hit a different level, and they were dominant. They won by 9, 10, 5, 7, and 10. But this Princeton team, when you look at them, games decided by wins by 3 goals or fewer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Also 5. And then once May hit, wins by 2, 10, 9, 4, 7, and 7. I think they're pretty similar to that 24 Notre Dame team. If we do the advanced stat,
I'm curious where because we talk about the 2025 Cornell team with just the 1 loss. That's going to be a kind of interesting comparison because you're going directly with rivals.
I think they're better. I think they're better than that Cornell team was. I just look at that Cornell team had to gut it out against Richmond in the quarterfinals. They were down late in that game. The Penn State game was pretty. The second Penn State semifinals was competitive. The Maryland game was competitive, though they did. I mean, that was a great Cornell team, but they were clearly pushed. And Princeton was just in the NCAA tournament. Cornell was clearly pushed to a different level than the Princeton team was. The 25 Cornell ranked first in offensive efficiency, 21st in defensive efficiency, 8th in face-off percentage, and 12th in save percentage. So they were really elite offensively, really elite on face-offs, and pretty good elsewhere. 26 Princeton finished number 1 in offense, number 7 in defense, number 8 in face-offs, and number 2 in save percentage. They were top 10 in every area. 24 Notre Dame ranked first in offense, first in defense, fourth in faceoff percentage, and second in save percentage. Really damn good. Here's what I'll say, though. I think 2024 was a little – I think the competition was a little tougher this year. I think by 2024, the competition – I mean, you look at that Final Four, kind of similar, I guess you could say. But Denver, Maryland, Virginia, you know, the 2 and 3 seeds didn't make the Final Four that year. Duke lost to Maryland and Hopkins lost to Virginia. I think Notre Dame's path. I think Notre Dame would have won they would have won anyway for sure, and they were definitely the best team. I think the overall teams this year were a tad better, I think, than 24. 22 Maryland, by the way, just for comparison's sake. First, and first. So I would say,
my comparison to Maryland was only NCAA tournament based. Obviously, I think the undefeated team is better.
I would say the 22 Maryland team is better. I think the 06 Virginia team is better, and I think the 05 Hopkins team, when you go undefeated, you just get that's what you get. That's your reward. You just get to be in a different class. After that, would you put Princeton over last year's Cornell team?
That's an interesting case because this year's Princeton's runs has had so much of a similar vibe to last year's Cornell.
I would. I would. I think they're a better team. If you put those two teams on a neutral field, I think Princeton's like a 1.5 goal favorite. Maybe 2. I think I'd take Princeton. Princeton or 2024 Notre Dame?
That's going to be a close one because the 2024 Notre Dame team had so much experience coming off that.
Yeah, they were full
first national title. That's the close one, I think.
Princeton or 2023 Notre Dame?
I take this year's Princeton over that year's Notre Dame. As I said, 2024, I think, is an overtime game.
Princeton versus both of Lars's Virginia teams, champions.
Definitely over 2019 and 2020. What seed were they in 2021?
4.
Yeah, I'd take Princeton over them.
Princeton or 2018 Yale?
This year's Princeton team.
I agree. Princeton or 2017 Maryland?
Might err on 2017 Maryland with that one. Because the 2017 Maryland team had so much high-end talent.
Yeah. Princeton. 2 more I'll do. Princeton or 2014 Duke?
That's another tough one because Duke, again, has the experience. But
that one to me feels like a very obvious rule. That 2014 Duke team was kind of weak in goal, but it didn't matter because it was there was no shot clock.
Yeah,
so you could kind of hide it. I think Crosse is actually the edge there for me. Princeton or 2012 Loyola?
See, that 2012 Loyola team is so underrated. But I don't think if they get into a shootout with this year's Princeton team, I don't think they can keep up. But I think that 2012 Loyola championship team is one of the most underrated I think we've ever seen.
Yeah,
I don't think they get the recognition that they deserve, given how people don't realize how dominant that squad was that year.
Well, it's also it's the most obvious bygone era of this will never happen again. Loyola gave up 8 goals on championship weekend. And in that run, they gave up total 22 goals in 4 games. They
never
won.
Seen that again.
Yeah, their last 3 games, they scored 10, 7, and 9. And they were never really at threat of losing, it felt like. That's just not happening again. I think the 3 champions, the 3 undefeateds are better. I think you could argue for 24 Notre Dame. Maybe argue for – after that, I think I might put Princeton in there. I think Princeton will probably make my top 5, this Princeton team.
Ooh.
I think they probably will. I think they were just dominant by the end. And they also worth pointing out, the trend that we are undergoing here. I need to just fact check this really, really quick.
So while you fact check, just
Okay, I got it. The last 5 national champions have beaten every team on their schedule. 22 Maryland went undefeated. 23 Notre Dame only lost to Virginia, who they then beat in the semifinals. 24 Notre Dame only lost to Georgetown, who they beat in the quarterfinals. 25 Cornell lost to Penn State,
who they beat in the semifinal.
And Princeton lost to Penn State and Cornell, who they beat in the later in the year. So we've had 5 straight champions beat every single team they played.
Huh.
I mean, it's the record. The last 5 national champions have a combined record of 81-6. The previous 5 national champions had lost 13 games. That's with 21 Virginia lost 4, 2019 Virginia lost 3, 2018 Yale lost 3, 2017 Maryland lost 3. 3 was like the average in the 2010s, average loss of the champion was 3.5. The last 5 years, your average loss of the champion is a little over 1. I mean, the quality of these teams, like, you got to be really, really, really freaking great to win the title.
And just some housekeeping on championship weekend. So attendance for the championship game was about on level with the semifinals. What was it, 24 and change?
Yeah, it looked bigger though. It was interesting.
Yeah, it looked bigger. Yeah. And ratings, it was interesting. ESPN's PR actually tweeted out hard numbers this time. Men's title game got 778,000 average viewers, the most watched men's final in 19 years. So that's going all the way back to the 2007 Hopkins Duke, and that was Duke coming off the scandal and Hopkins with Rabel. So that was a blockbuster one. So that's wild. Tournament up 31% and most watched in 13 years. Women's tournament was up 72%, had 470,000 viewers, and the women's final was up 83% over last year. So, yes, a lot of it's because of the big data numbers and everything, but still, it's something.
It's tricky because it's really good. But I'm also kind of at the point with this where, like, what is ESPN will tell us what we think about it based on, like, the games they get next year. Like, if there are more TV, the TV inventory has kind of steadily kind of decreased a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's like, if ESPN,
ESPN2 on the weekends is just re-airing SEC network specials on Saturday afternoons. Not even live sports. Like, if you're going to show us, how about some more, instead of airing SEC Storied for the millionth time or College Football 150 for the 7th straight year, you have the Ivy League contract. They've won the past 2 national championships.
Just put softball on ESPN2 and put lacrosse on ESPNU.
Yes, because softballs are getting good ratings. Reward them with some ESPN2 slots. That opens up ESPNU slots. Get some more Ivy League, more Big East, more non-con ACC. Maybe when the NCAA tournament comes, you get a few more ESPN2 slots during it.
Or ABC?
ABC? I mean, Memorial Day. What are you airing on Memorial Day on ABC?
Yeah.
I mean, might be a stretch to get the women's final on ABC with all the softball going on, but maybe worth a shot there. If they're showing, they're moving a lot of NCAA championships over to ABC. Give it a try. You have the women's. You're going up against the Indy 500 anyway, so it's worth a shot. Throw it on ABC at 1:00. College World Series game at 3. Women's College World Series Super Regionals. Softball Super Regionals at 3:30. NBA or NHL at night. There you go. And then you got nothing on Memorial Day Monday. I don't think the local affiliates will complain about losing a 2-hour block in the afternoon. So something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, so if they really think it's good, then we'll see. Well, yeah, show it exactly. If not, it's just like clearly it's not. I mean, yes, it's improvement, but it's not good. It's got to be tangible. It's great if more people are watching. What's the tangible outcome and return of it? And if the tangible return of it is not, more television windows and inventory, then it's a bit like whatever. So I hope we'll see it. The attendance we talked about, I think all things considered, it was probably about as good as it could have been. With the teams you had there, sort of the economic conditions, the weather, not close really to a major metropolitan area. Not great. Obviously, I would have liked it to be better, but could have been worse too. And so you'll kind of sort of take it for what it is. Next year it's in what, Foxborough, I think, or Philly? Philly, right?
I believe Philly. Let me see. So let me see. I think next year I think it's Philly because it was supposed to be this year. Yeah, so next year's Philly, or no, this year is supposed to be Foxborough. So Foxborough gets to make good in 2028. Next year's Philly.
Yeah. And then we'll see what they do after that. I imagine it will probably just continue as it's kind of been doing, but we'll have to wait and see.
All right. Let's wrap things up with a little sneak peek to 2027. So I think it's going to be interesting with 2027. We talk about the ebbs and flows. There's a lot of teams that are returning some pretty balanced rosters, which I think is the interesting part about this. Yes, Princeton's got to replace Craddock and McMeekin and Palumbo, but otherwise they've got a lot of the heavy hitters back. But at the same token, you look at the other Final Four teams. Notre Dame's returning a lot. Duke is young. Penn State's going to be returning a lot. Hopkins is going to be returning a lot. North Carolina is going to be returning a lot.
Yep.
With Duffy and Petromala as seniors now. It's really only Syracuse is the only top program that's it's Syracuse and Richmond are really the only two that are going to see a drop off. But otherwise, everyone else is kind of going to be stabilized and getting more experience. So it's going to be you got to figure Maryland's going to be back in the mix too. So it's going to be a wild year next year just because everyone's returning. Cornell's returning. Cornell's a young team going to be returning a lot. I think this year there's a lot of young teams that leveled up this year that it's going to be a wild ride the next 2 years with all these teams now going to be experienced and chock full of juniors and seniors that have been there.
I think this year is weird. It's kind of because to me, the story of this year is that we thought there were 3 great teams and 2 of them just didn't materialize the way we figured. Maryland, everything that just happened there. And then Syracuse, wasn't a disappointment, but just never took. We thought there was an extra step to take, and they just didn't really take it. And so when that happened, you had a wide open field behind them that just wasn't. I think, wasn't really ready to emerge into that kind of spot. It wasn't quite their window. They weren't in their window yet.
Yeah, the third of the big 3 took advantage of it with Princeton, but everyone else, it got open from there on back, and you had teams take advantage of that opportunity.
But they weren't in their real championship
they weren't in their
window.
Yeah.
Next year, it feels like you can have, ideally, and I hope so, because I look back at this year and I'm like, man, I just don't think we got a lot of great games out of it. I just don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think Hopkins Cornell was easily the game of the tournament. There wasn't anything really that came anywhere close to it.
So, Duke Richmond was pretty good too. But those 2 games were back to back. I think next year has the chance to be more, I think kind of open still to a degree, but like with quality teams that are kind of either approaching or in their championship window.
I think Georgetown's gotten themselves back into that window a little bit too. So I
mean, listen, if you want to take the George, like, I'm not saying I'm selling my Georgetown stock, but like, I mean, look, it's available for a cheap price. I mean, like if you, like, I mean, if you want to buy some, it's here. I put together a way too early top 20. Stop me when you think I've I've gone too far somewhere. I got Princeton. Then I got UNC. Then I got Notre Dame. Then I got Penn State. Then I got Hopkins. Then I got Maryland. Then I got Cornell. I got Duke. I got Georgetown. I got UVA. That's 10.
Yeah, so that's going to be the wild thing is I didn't even mention Virginia and how young they were and overperformed. The question is the coaching change and the vibes. It's going to be that's going to be the most interesting team by far next year is Virginia because they've got the young talent and they're going to be entering their window, but is all the chaos going around the program going to affect them?
That and so there are 3 spots here when I was putting together that I feel like people would sort of take issue with. Or maybe like Penn State at 4 is a tricky one because they lose Alex Ross and they lose some of the key personnel on the defensive side. But I just look at what they have coming back on offense, and it's like there's just so much talent there on offense. They had a freshman goalie this year in Preston Hawkins who played really well and is going to be set up well for the future. Their face-off unit group is back. I just think they're going to be. If this was a kind of down-ish Penn State year, like the floor for that program right now is really high.
Yeah, I feel like every time we talk about them losing pieces, they just rebound lately. So,
I mean, the worst season they've had in the last 5 years or 4 years was a first-round loss, and they were a really good team still that year that just kind of had some injuries and, couldn't quite get over the hump. I think people may take a bit of issue with Hopkins, but that was a really good team this year that brings back a ton next year. The only significant loss is probably Matt Collison and maybe Carson Brown. You figure their weakness this year was face-off play, which should improve. They got Walter Zhao from Vermont. Goalie play, I kind of wonder who's going to be the goalie. But like on offense, Hopkins brings back it's the total reverse of after 2024, where Hopkins lost like all of their offensive pieces. Now they bring back everyone except for Matt Collison. So it's like 7, 8, 9 of their top 10 scorers are back next year. I think they'll be in there. Maryland is the one where I'm kind of hedging my bet. Like I'm betting on it. It can't get any worse. I mean, if it does, God forbid.
I think the only thing I might disagree in is I don't know if I put them higher than say like Duke because Duke as a young team, yes, they had the luck of the draw, but that's a Final Four team. So with a lot of young talent. So
here's my Duke thing. If you want to bet on the talent with Duke, then certainly I can't talk you out of that. Like you certainly have a real argument there. I do think they get. I don't know if Max Sloat is back. He might get a medical redshirt for 2023. Some arguments with Duke. You lose Ada McGuire, who was your best short stick. Defensive midfielder, kind of a real piece there. They will lose. They got Charlie Johnson back defensively. So now that I'm thinking about it, I guess my questions with Duke are kind of this. I do sometimes worry about the team that overperforms in the tournament, and so we kind of overrank them to start next year. Like that path was clearly better than everybody else's path in the NCAA tournament. They didn't have to play a Big Ten, ACC, or Ivy team in the first round of the quarterfinals. And to me, it's like, is it the Duke team of, the early part of the season where, yes, they did play a lot of close games, but they also lost them? Or is it more the Duke team of the tournament? If you want to bet on the talent, and like I can't argue with you. I will say I have done that in the past a little bit and gotten burned. But like it is to a degree you could argue a degree of talent that is just so overwhelming. But I don't know. I said that a couple of times during the O'Neal era that it was a degree of talent that was overwhelming, and so Duke is the one. If you wanted to like swap Duke and Maryland here, I would say I see it. Here's my Maryland argument. They bring back the goalie. They bring back largely every piece of the defense towards the end of the year. They do need another poll. But they bring back their top 2 long stick middies. They bring back their top cover defender. They bring back both face-off guys who are really good. And they bring back the goalie. They're going to be really good on that side of the ball. The question is the offense. And my thesis here is that the offense can't be any worse than it was last year. I know they lose all these guys, and that's fair. The offense wasn't good anyway. So
I would not bet on Maryland having 2 down years in a row, to say the least.
Basically, if I have you 6th, I'm saying you're a quarterfinal type team, and I think they'll be a quarterfinal type team, again next year. So, that's probably the one where I've overstepped a little bit. If you wanted to swap Duke and Maryland, so put Duke 6, Maryland 8, I think that's probably about. Virginia is another one that's tough for me because it's like fair, definitely the Youngstown coming back, but it's also like, not even the vibes, but like how much better do we think they get? Because this was not a great team this year. It's like I think that's part of the thing for me is this is sort of like the Syracuse argument where it's like sometimes we just always assume the young teams are just going to keep getting better, and sometimes they don't. Like, what if this is just kind of where Virginia, like, who's going to be their goalie? Who's going to be the face-off guy? I think Virginia's going to be good. I guess my question is more of sometimes these, sometimes they just don't become great, I mean, UNC kind of is like this too. Is like we keep assuming eventually UNC is going to break through to that Final Four cusp, and it's like, I mean, next year has to be the year, right? Because with Duffy and Pence, like they haven't done it yet. So I just sometimes beware the linear progression. We always just think like, oh, you have seniors, you're going to be great. It's like sometimes you're not. Sometimes you just kind of hit your ceiling a bit. So Yale at 11. I do think Yale's going to be really good. I do kind of want to like. I've seen some people talk about like Final Four maybe as soon as next year. I'm like, I don't know about that. I still think the Ivy is going to be really tough. And they do lose. Unfortunately, they lose some guys like Patrick Passan on that defensive side of the ball. But I do think Yale will be back in the tournament mix. I got Ohio State 12.
Speaking of vibes,
it's just kind of the spot for them. Like they're going to be. They get Van Buren back. They're going to be good. But it's like, how much higher can I really put them? Like I can't, honestly. Like the offense, in good faith, I cannot put this team any higher than, 12. Like okay, I got Houston at 13. That's just a lot of pieces.
A lot of replays. It's going to depend on what they get in the transfer portal. I think is going to be the thing.
There ain't a lot in the transfer portal. I'll tell you that. They got Zach Amen from Bryant. I think he's a really good player from the midfield. So he could step in. You lose your top 4 scorers. That's just that's a lot.
At least they got McCool back, so they have some stabilizing for them.
McCool and Mullen, like that's your whole kind of thesis is those guys can kind of. Mullen, I do worry a little bit. Mullen, that's a lot of tread on those tires that he's had. I think
he did have a good NCAA tournament, which was good to see at least, though.
He did. I think Cuse is. If you're gonna pick a team to miss the tournament, if you're gonna pick 2 teams to miss the tournament that made it this year, I think Cuse and Richmond are your 2 kind of picks. I have Richmond down at 20th.
Ooh.
Might be a little low. I would maybe put them. So here's the teams I have in between. You tell me if I'm Harvard or Richmond for next year.
Harvard.
Loyola or Richmond for next year.
Might or Richmond. I know Loyola's getting better, but they got to prove it to me.
It's fair. They had a good team this year, and they bring back. They got it was a Mason Cook who scored 59 goals as a sophomore. Keenan Everhart, like the talent level there feels higher than it's been in a while. Army or Richmond?
I would have Army ahead of Loyola. I think that's a tough one.
Army, I just look at you're losing Gunnar, you're losing Evan Plunkett.
Yeah.
Gunnar
but it's Army. They always find a way to reload. Precisely. It feels like.
Penn or Richmond?
Maybe slight edge to Penn.
I think Penn could be a good team next year. They were better than I thought. They were better than I thought this year, and
it's another year of Ray's system that could be your candidate for the real big boost. from preseason to end of the year?
Michigan or Richmond?
Richmond. I think Michigan's another one of these cases of you got to show me something.
Sure, but a couple big freshmen played. Timmy Shanahan, the BU guy, go and play with his brother. If you plugged him in there, I think that could really be big for them. Jacksonville, Richmond.
Richmond.
Okay, so you would have Richmond as like 15 or 16.
Yeah,
which I think is fair. I just look at. I mean, listen. I think they're going to be good because I just don't think it's. I think there's a level, just the floor that Chamati's established. But you lose your best player in Aiden O'Neill. You lose your best midfielder in Joe Sheridan. You lose your best defender in Hunter Smith. You lose your best shorty in Jack Pilling. You lose Farrell back on the defensive end. They lose 3 or 4 of their best defenders. They lose their best offensive player, their best move. They lose 3 of their top 5 scorers. That's just a lot of seniors going out the door. There's still talent there for sure. Creo, Little John, Pickard, Charlie Pack on the defensive end, like Penafeather Stevens. Like they still got some good players there, but they bring back the goalie Connor Knight. But that's a lot of pieces going out the door for Rich. I think it's more going to be like the Rich. I think they could still make the tournament for sure. I just think it's going to be more like the Richmond teams of 2024, 2023. If they're in the tournament, they're probably more towards the 2 or 3 side of it. I think these last 2 years was Richmond's kind of, for now, that was Richmond's window. And, I mean, they won an NCAA tournament game, got to a quarterfinal and hosted another one, so they didn't waste it. But I feel like they've kind of, for the moment, sort of hit their, momentary ceiling. So there you go. That's other teams you could kind of look at would be.
So no Big East teams in your top 20? No
I had Georgetown. I had Georgetown at 10.
Oh.
I mean, who else would I? Who else? Big East kind of. I kind of tried to go high on Denver this year. That didn't.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't go well. Providence maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Any other Patriot League teams would probably be. BU is always kind of in the mix, but losing Shanahan's pretty tough.
Pretty tough, yeah.
Lehigh was better this year. Bucknell didn't have a bad year, but I think that's a pretty clear. I mean, Towson's going to lose Weishar and some guys, so Albany and Towson both lose. We thought this year was their year. Maybe Utah.
Maybe an opening for Stony Brook. Yeah, Utah. You said as well. Yeah, Utah could.
Stony Brook. It was a pretty young team. I think they'd have to get better. I don't think the team that we saw this year was a top 20 team, but
20 team.
I think
Navy falling off. I guess you're seeing Navy falling off.
They weren't a top 20 team this year.
Yeah.
I mean, early in the year, kind of. Stony Brook Prom, Tommy Wilk in the transfer portal, their goalie. I thought was probably their best player. So that's Sienna's had a good team the past couple years. Sacred Heart's been pretty good. These are some other teams. I think that's a kind of clear mix.
Number 20, Villanova.
It's been a couple. What was it? 6 and 8 this year. They were 8 and 7 in 2025. So they at some point in the year, Villanova will probably be. Did they get ranked this year at some point? Yeah, they beat Penn State.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So Villanova will be ranked 20 at some point. There will be a week where I'm just like, I can slide Villanova in there.
Villanova to there. It's a customary 20th spot. Hooray. Alrighty. So that's just about it. We've got plenty of off-season content coming soon this month. The Crosses, the most prestigious award show in lacrosse podcasts.
Indeed.
Again, if you haven't joined us, we were recording, we were doing this during the Champions League final. And good news!
Football is saved. It's a great day for Europe, the world. Hope.
Yeah, just imagine the vibes of the World Cup, where every watch party is just everyone in Arsenal jerseys reminding everyone that Arsenal won the double.
Just all of it. It's just a beautiful time. Really, finally some good news.
right. So you can always, as usual, follow us on Twitter at college_cross. If you're watching this on YouTube, smash the like button, hit subscribe, turn on noties for notifications for when we have our podcast posted. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast from.
We're getting close to 200. You could be the 200 subscriber on YouTube.
That might be more than the Washington Post opinion page.
That's a good point. Let me look at that. Washington Post. What's the channel? Yeah, is it Washington Post opinion? Here you go. I feel like it's just. Yeah, these numbers really do. There's like a specific page that they have where like, yeah, like their opinion page does like, videos. Even they're just like regular videos though. Like it's not exactly what you would be expecting. Oh, here we go. This was on May 10th, 2026. So far, the investment has produced an astonishingly small audience. Just 182 YouTube subscribers. With many videos attracting only a dozen views.
Look at us.
I gotta scope this out. WAPO.
So you can help us.
Yeah, here we go. Opinion plus commentary by the Washington Post. These are all very short form, but some of them have like, I mean, that Kevin Cassis thing we did got like 1,000 views. So thank you guys for tuning into that. We appreciate it. A lot of good engagement on those. So we appreciate your support all season long.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on, I think I found it. Make it make sense. We're making sense of an increasingly complex world through reporting, interviews, and expert analysis. Join us every weekday. Their last video got AI is the new climate crisis, ? 647 views. Will robots take your job? 416 views. Yeah, some of these, yeah, they have like debate. Did we lose the Iran war? 234 views. That one podcast I did where I compared Virginia's situation to the Strait of Hormuz got more views than that. But thank you. Yes, please subscribe. Thank you for tuning in to our shows all season long. We greatly appreciate it. We got even more, conversation and more people along for the ride than we had last year. So we greatly appreciate it, and we think it'll be an even better 2027. So subscribe. The Power Hour. It's a great place to be. Get to talk to Crosse, get to hang out.
It'll be better than Fox's World Cup post-game shows.
For sure, 100%. So be there for the start of 2027, but also be there, for all the videos we put up. And yeah, if you're listening the old-fashioned way, nothing's changing. Just do your thing.
Keep doing your thing. All right. So thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you in another week or two for the 2026 Crossies. In the meantime, even though it's cloudy, windy, 50-some-odd degree day, it's
nice here.
Summer. Stay hydrated.
Beautiful out there. Look at that. Stay hydrated. Take care, folks.